Well, hello, COS supporters, and welcome back to another edition of COS Live. This is a special edition because in just a few minutes, we are expecting a hearing of the Colorado House Committee on State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs. This is in consideration of our Article 5 Convention of States legislation. You'll hear it referred to as HJR 24-1024, HJR 24-1024. Representative Rose Pugliese is our primary legislative sponsor and champion there in the Colorado House. The team, I must mention, has recruited 11 legislative co-sponsors thus far. So a huge round of applause for our team that is putting in lots of work to get additional co-sponsors along with Rose Pugliese. If the committee vote is successful here today, our resolution would go to the Colorado House for a full House floor vote, which would be huge. That would mean Colorado would have an opportunity to join the 19 other sister states that have passed our resolution. Again, 19 states have passed our Article 5 resolution, which calls for amendments in 3 areas: fiscal restraints, term limits on elected officials, and limits on the federal scope and jurisdiction. We need 34 states to get to a convention, so that means just 15 states away from having the first ever Article 5 Convention of States to rein in Washington, D.C. and return power to the people. Currently, there are 20 additional states that have introduced our resolution into their state legislature this year, including the great state of Colorado. So how did we get to this point? Well, the Convention of States Colorado team has been working on overdrive to get people across the state to petition their state legislators to call a convention of states. So far, we have 54,000 Coloradans who have signed the Convention of States petition. Again, that's 54,000 people in Colorado have said, yes, I want you to call the very first Article 5 Convention of States to reign in Washington, D.C. Now, anytime someone signs our petition, anytime someone checks the box to sign the petition, that goes directly to their state representative. We're unlike any other organization where our petition goes directly to the state legislator, asking them to vote yes for COS. So the Colorado team is going to be there in person, but unfortunately, there is only audio for this hearing. Again, there is not going to be video, so you won't be able to see the COS buttons. You won't be able to see smiling face from our Convention of States patriots, but you will get to hear them. And I'm sure that there's going to be several patriots there who are very enthusiastic about reining in the federal government, who are dedicated patriots and who genuinely want to see restrictions put on the federal government. So make sure that you stay tuned. You be aware that you will not see any video. So we're still waiting right now. The committee is on the 3rd item for their hearing. We are the 4th item, so we're just waiting for the committee to move from the third item onto our resolution, which is, again, HJR 24-1024. So we're just waiting a few minutes now. And I just want to thank all of you for being so patient as we were delayed. We had heard from Deanna Beckett, who is the regional director for the Western Patriots region, and she oversees Colorado and the Colorado team. She informed us that we had been moved from the first item on the agenda of the day to the 4th item on the agenda, which is really unfortunate. But thank you so much for being so patient with us and sticking in there. And as soon as we are up, we will transition to the audio so that you can listen to our primary sponsor and the proponent testimony on behalf of our resolution. So just a few things that I want to mention before we get to the hearing. 19 states, as I said, have passed our resolution, including Georgia, Alaska, Alabama, Florida, Indiana, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Tennessee, North Dakota, Arizona, Missouri, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Utah, Nebraska, Wisconsin, West Virginia, and South Carolina. Again, we need 34 states to get to the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. Then delegates from across the nation, from across all of the 50 states, can send representatives to represent their state and to discuss amendments such as touch on fiscal restraints, term limits for elected officials, and reining in the jurisdiction of the federal government. In this year alone, we've had 21 states introduce the Convention of States resolution, and those states are Colorado, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, and Wyoming. Again, 21 states. Several of those states we saw some victories. In Hawaii, for example, the Hawaii state team received a hearing, just like Colorado is about to receive a hearing right now for our resolution. They received a hearing and they passed the resolution out of that committee. Not a single no vote. Yeses across the board. It was a first time for Hawaii and a first time for the Hawaii team. Also in Massachusetts, they also received a win. They were passed out of committee as well. So there are states right now that are moving our resolution closer to ultimate victory. Convention of States is on the march right now because citizens across the country are tired of the federal government and how it's been weaponized against we the people and how it's been weaponized to benefit people in Washington, D.C. and also the elite. So people across the country are standing up. They're saying we want to see a convention. We want to rein in an out of control federal government, rebalance the power between the states and the federal government so that the people's voices can truly be heard. Because unfortunately, Congress is never going to rein in its own power. Congress is never going to put term limits on itself, and they're never going to curb their own spending. This is the only way that we can truly restrict the federal government from the waste, the fraud, the abuse, and from spending way too much time in Washington, D.C. Another state to look out for this year, we are still waiting in North Carolina. In 2023, the resolution was passed in one of the chambers. It was passed in the House of Representatives in North Carolina. So we are awaiting a Senate vote there. And if that happens and it is a favorable vote, North Carolina will become the 20th state to pass the Convention of States resolution. So that is something that we are keeping an eye on. In the meantime, I want to remind all of you that we are still on item number 3. We're waiting for our resolution to come up. It should be just a few more minutes. So right now we're going to tune into that committee hearing so that you can listen in. At this moment, we're not on our resolution, but our resolution will be coming up shortly. So please stick around. And because after our resolution is voted on, we're going to bring on Deanna Beckett, the regional director, to give us a recap on what happened in that committee hearing, and she's going to be giving us some coverage on what this means going forward if the vote is favorable or if the vote fails. So make sure you tune into the end, and we're going to go to that committee hearing now.
In line 13, you're calling out specifically electric vehicles. I would note that there's a lot of questions surrounding non-electric vehicles, for example, where their aluminum comes from, quote unquote blind spots in the supply chain. Have you thought at all about making it broader to encompass? Because I wouldn't want to see our taxpayer dollars being used to pay for any vehicles manufactured through forced labor. So I was just wondering if there was any consideration that you had on that front.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And no different than what I told anybody else in this committee, I'm willing to sit down and figure this out. I mean, slave labor is bad no matter what it's for. I think we can all agree on that. I think this is one time that us in this chamber should be able to sit down and not be so divisive and try to figure these things out. I'm open to that discussion. I mean, I don't know. I mean, any more better how I could lay out that I'm willing to have that discussion. So, the same offer that I gave to Representative Epps. I mean, if you all would like to sit down and try to hammer this out and make it even better, if we're getting to the end goal, then I think those are definite conversations that we can all have.
Excellent. Anything further? All right, we will go to the witness phase. Would anyone like to testify on HJR 241023? Okay, Ms. Fernandez. please state your name for the record. The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
My name is Marla Fernandez. I'm with Marla Fernandez Mediation Group, and I'm also a paralegal. So I'm gonna testify as a paralegal because I feel that this needs to be addressed. Number one, the resolution may implicate the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. Grants access to I don't know what I wrote. Overreach, it might be an overreach of the state authority. It might have a potential economic impact, and it also may have complexity of supply chain. So the state may be engaging in regulation that could affect the interstate commerce. It also may affect the 14th Amendment due process, violates the basic human rights, and constitutes discrimination. Number three, it implicates the federal preemption, question of federal preemption, UFLPA, conflicts with the preemption of federal law. And while we might have state sovereignty, we have to be very, very careful with the legalities, the legal framework, and not usurping federal law. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, thank you, Mark. Just on the, how do you say your last name again?
Fernandez.
Fernandez.
Fernandez, sorry. I thought there was a hyphen in there. But if if the state is engaging in this voluntarily and just saying, we don't want to spend our money on something that is engaging in the use of that utilizes slave labor, would that be violating any of those clauses?
It is. It's going to be violating the federal. It's going to preempt the federal law. So anything that preempts the federal law is considered a conflict. That conflicts. You're going to be pitting yourself against the federal government, and you're going to see yourself in the Supreme Court. This will directly conflict because of the UFLPA. Gotta look it up. I don't remember the Commerce Clause from my paralegal days exactly, but and I can't remember the lines right now. I just really quickly wrote it out. This is my worst, but I could tell you, I could send you some information later.
Anything further from the committee? So thank you for your time this afternoon.
You're
Marla.
welcome.
Okay, final call for witnesses on 1023. Seeing none, the witness testimony phase is closed. Amendment phase, resolution sponsor. None from the sponsor. Any amendments from the committee? None from the committee. The amendment phase is closed. Wrap up, AML Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I know we have a long day. I think that between the questions, the resolution is pretty simple. I've committed to both Rep. Basenecker, Rep. Epps, and Rep. Woodrow that if there's anything we could do, I've never amended a resolution. I don't even know the possibility of that when we get it from here. If it makes it out of here to the committee of the whole, I would be willing to sit down and try to have those conversations to make it more palatable and see if we can move forward on this. That's the commitment I give to you all. And with that, I'm not going to chat about it anymore. I'd like to urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Hey, committee, any closing comments? Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, AML. I will note the request for free labor in a bill where we are talking about free labor. I cannot separate my knowledge of the good congressman from New Jersey and the current work happening at the federal level around resolutions related to this mining from the discussion here, to the extent that, the language is so similar. I came into the hearing actually expecting that I would be a yes on the resolution. I'm still troubled by the wording around China. And while I, again, am not sure how I'm going to vote, I want to name that if I'm a yes, it's a yes with a full willingness that I do not believe this is about the children of Congo. Not that you don't feel that way, but that isolating this issue is about industry competition and issues around EV and vehicles. That's what this is underlying. That's what's underlying this. I see it as. But I do actually agree fully with the premises and the propositions around aligning against child labor. So to the extent that there could have been a version of this that refrained from mentioning China, I could have been on board, and I will figure it out otherwise. But I just wanted to name that so that people don't read too much into the vote either way.
Any further closing comments? Representative Parenti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the bill sponsor for bringing this forward. You know, I agree. I don't think anyone here is in favor of exploitative labor, uh, children, adults, otherwise. And I agree with the premise of what you're trying to do here. I am concerned about the sort of ethereal nature of the resolution as written. We're not really sure what steps we're trying to take. We're not sure what steps are available. We're not sure what the legality of it, what the meaning of it is. Obviously, child labor affects a lot more markets than just this one. That's okay. That doesn't mean we don't necessarily just fix this one, but it is a larger issue. So, and it's the 22nd of April. So I'm not sure that we really have a whole lot of time to explore those concepts between now and the end of this session. But I really appreciate your heart, and I appreciate, you know, where you're coming from on this, and just hope that over the interim, I'm going to be a no today, but over the interim, that you find those experts, that you find those groups that are willing to maybe put something together that's a little bit more cogent, that we can really, you know, kind of sink our teeth in and figure out what does this really mean for the state of Colorado. Thank you.
Representative Wilford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, AML Winter, for bringing this bill. I know that your heart is really genuine in bringing this resolution and to trying to identify different solutions to forced child labor. I absolutely am with you on the concept of not being on board for forced child labor. It's, you know, I think it's horrific, and at the same time, you know, I'm really struck by the reality that this bill is really focused on electric vehicles, and there are a ton of different products that utilize many of the minerals in which you reference in the bill. And so I have a tough time singling out just electric vehicles, and so I think for that reason, I have to be a no today. Furthermore, I know that the clean vehicle tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act is working to secure critical minerals from countries that don't rely on child labor or on forced labor. And I think that we can agree that mineral sourcing is a big problem. And for, you know, as we continue down the path of a fully dressed transition, I think that there are some standards that we can work to put into place to ensure that international labor rights are upheld. And so I'm happy to continue this conversation, but will be a no today.
Representative Bottoms.
Thank you, Rep. Winter, for bringing this. I think there are other things that we can make bills about here. I totally agree with that. I stopped wearing Nike for this reason. I don't believe in this child exploitation. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's more slavery on the planet today than there ever's been in its history, ever. And this particular area of the world in the Congo, I've been there. It's horrible. I love electric cars. I would have one if it weren't for this issue. I like them, but I see those kids. I've seen them in person. I see them in my head, and I can't get that out of my head. That for some reason in America we just think, well, you know, it's okay because I get to drive my car, and maybe I get a little bit cleaner planet, while there are kids literally starving to death and being brutalized every single day. This is the part of America I don't like. We all talk about different things about it. America, we're so selfish and narcissistic and so up our own rear that we cannot see that there are these kids on the other side of the planet that truly are in slavery, in some of the most debased, destructive mentalities. And so to me, the argument, well, if we're not going to deal with it all, let's not deal with some. Well, those kids are still going to be in slavery tomorrow and the next day and the next year and 10 years from now while we play little games. And that stuff drives me crazy. So yeah, I'm totally in favor of the bill. And I'd like to see, let's hit some other areas. And I think China is where we start on a lot of this stuff. Some of the worst slavery is in China too. And so, yeah, I'd help you with any of those bills also.
Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank you also for pointing out that there are blind spots in this, and this could be expanded, but this is an excellent start. Amendments can easily add to the products that we're looking at. It's not a matter of making them illegal in Colorado. It's just making it a matter of saying, what are our priorities? What are we going to spend money on? So often we're straining the gnat and swallowing the camel and saying, we want to cut out a little bit of pollution here, and we're driving exponentially more pollution in another area. So I see these issues here, and there are true disproportionately impacted communities over in the Congo versus not to diminish what's going on here. We want to strive for the best we can, but we're so much of what we're doing is not solving pollution. We're just outsourcing it, and we're outsourcing it to nations who are less concerned about it than we are. So I think this is a great free market. There's obviously some questions that have to be addressed, but I definitely think it's worth going to the body and the committee of the whole and having that conversation, looking those things up. I really don't know how it could be a violation of the Commerce Clause when it's the state voluntarily spending its money and just saying, we don't want to spend money on a product that or this product or that product or whatever combination, that we just don't want to spend money on products that engage in slave labor. I think benefits of that is that it pushes it to possibly technologies back here, but I don't think that should be the driver. I think the driver in this case should be that with a free market approach, we can immediately have an impact on improving those individuals' lives, whether they're children or labor. I mean, it might be the solution. All they have to do is to maintain that market. Those countries might just have to pay their laborers a little bit better, and they can do that overnight. It doesn't have to be a trade war. They just might have to go, well, if we want to maintain these profits, we pay these individuals better. And that can happen immediately. So I think this is an easy, there might be a few questions that have to answer, but for me, it's an easy free market solution to make people's lives better and also improve the environment on a global basis, as opposed to thinking that we can just pollute in the Congo and then not have the ramifications here.
Any further closing comments? Representative Bradley.
Thank you. And thank you, Assistant Minority Leader, for bringing this. We know that we have horrific trafficking in the United States and also all over the world. Trafficking is just coercion, whether that's sexual or labor, either one. And I heard a couple of people say, well, what about this industry? What about this industry? What about this industry? Well, let's start somewhere. Let's start having the conversation. I'm with you. I mean, we just put it under the rug and just ignore it because it's not taking care of all industry. Let's start somewhere. Let's start with the first. We talk about aiming high. Well, you're actually aiming a little bit lower right now. And now you're getting called out for aiming a little bit lower because you're only including one specific industry. There's plenty. Let's add more then. Let's add more, but let's get it in the book so we can at least start talking about it. If we talk about being so concerned about what is happening in our world, this is a first step to look at truly the damaging effects of what is happening in our world. And my name is on it. And I support you 100%. I just hope this body is ready to start with a yes on this and work towards other ways of making our world a better place. Thank you for bringing it.
Any further closing comments from the committee? All right, seeing none, a proper motion routes HJR 1023 to the full House. Representative Bottoms.
I move that to the full House.
Second.
Proper motion by Representative Bottoms, second by Representative Bradley. Ms. King, please poll the committee.
Representatives Bottoms,
Yes.
Bradley,
Yes.
Brown,
Excused.
DeGraff,
Yes.
Epps, Pass. Parenti,
No.
Ricks,
Yes.
Brunel,
Pass.
Wilford,
No.
Epps. I mean, yes, you could, I guess. Pass. Brunel,
Yes.
Epps,
Yes.
Basenecker,
No.
Mr. Chair.
Yes for today. That passes 7-3 with one excused. Okay, next we are going to move right along to HJR 1024. We'll call the minority leader back up to talk about a convention of states.
Yeah, I just looked up UFLPA.
Representative Puglisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. I really do appreciate it to be able to bring forward this Convention of States resolution. This has been an organization I've been involved with for years, mostly because I have been and continue to be dedicated to imposing term limits on Congress. I think it's incredibly important that we have some accountability there. And as you all know, there's one of two ways under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to propose amendments to our Constitution. One way is this resolution. The other way is for both chambers of commerce to propose amendments by a 2/3 supermajority before sending to the states for ratification. A convention of states have never occurred in U.S. history, but there are currently 19 states that have already passed the Convention of States resolution and 34 are required. We've got a lot of folks in the room today. I know I have reached out to a lot of people on both sides of the aisle to talk about this resolution. There might even be some amendments coming forward because I think that there's even some potential to limit this Convention of States even further. Like I said, my interest has been and will continue to be term limits on Congress. Clearly, they will not do it on themselves. And I think it's worth a conversation, especially in this time of year. And I think that there's the enthusiasm for Convention of States is growing. I think people are definitely having conversations. And while I have been a supporter for years on having a Convention of States, it has been brought many times before to this body in several forms. And this year, I met with constituents in my district who asked me to bring it forward. They feel very passionately. There was actually numerous witnesses that wanted to testify today, and I asked them to limit it because I know how difficult this time of year is for all of us. But I do think having their voices heard is incredibly important. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I would take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, questions? Representative Wilford.
Thank you very much. Minority Leader Puglisi, I'm really trying.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. I am wondering, in looking at Article 5, I don't see any rules for a like a constitutional convention. How would this work?
Madam Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we've got some great witnesses who have been involved in this for a long time who could probably go through exactly how this would happen in a little bit better way than I can explain it. So basically, it would be an application to Congress to hold this Convention of States. Like I said, there's only 19 states that have already passed this, 34 would be required. And then at that point, we'd be able to propose amendments. My resolution is limited to having conversations around fiscal restraints on federal government, limiting power and jurisdiction, and then most importantly to me is term limits on Congress. I hope that answered your question to some extent.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Yeah, it certainly helped. I was more curious around the mechanics of like, so we move into this constitutional convention. who has voting authority, who does not. Is it a majority? Is it a 2/3? And so just trying to better understand those mechanics. And I appreciate that you did really limit the topics, or at least the scope in which Colorado could participate. But I'm curious, outside of that scope, if we were to reach the 34 state or whatever 35 state threshold, um, there's really nothing that could limit a convention to just those two issues. So technically, there could be amendments that could revoke some of our most cherished rights, like the ability to protest or freedom of religion or a right to privacy. And so I was just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Madam Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Wilford, for the questions. And I really do appreciate your engagement on this resolution. So I had those same questions, right? Because there are things in the Constitution that I personally believe in that I wouldn't want to see changed. And I know members on my side also had some of those concerns. It is my understanding that because we were limiting Colorado's participation. So if we said, yes, Colorado agrees, it would be under the stipulations that the Convention of States would be limited to these three items and not be expanded. At that point, it is my understanding we would not participate if it was expanded beyond the three things that we enumerated in our resolution. That is my understanding.
Further, Representative Bottoms.
So the way Representative Wilford said that is part of my concern here also. Just as a clarification, it's not actually a constitutional convention. That's not what it is. It's a convention of states. Those are not the same thing. But I am concerned with that. How would you be able to limit it to these three things? I believe in all three of those things, but how do you guarantee that it doesn't, that a fourth one's not added in somehow or something?
Madam Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Bottoms. I do appreciate the question because, again, I had those same questions. I wanted it to be very limited in scope and purpose. Again, it is my understanding, and yes, you're right, it would be a convention of states, not a constitutional convention, that it would be, if we were to say, yes, Colorado wants to be engaged in this process, it would be for those three limited purposes and nothing more, barring amendments, if this were to make the floor. Barring amendments that would expand that scope, it is not my intention to expand that scope. And if there were the states to get this approved, it would have to be limited. Colorado's participation would be limited only by these three elements. And if it expanded anywhere further than that, then this body would have to take it back up to agree whether or not to expand it. But our participation would be limited to these three elements. But I do understand your concerns.
Any further questions from the committee? Okay, we are going to move on to the witness testimony phase. At the request of the resolution sponsor, we're going to start with folks who are signed up in an opposed or neutral position. If I could call up Eunice Brownlee, Marla Fernandez, John Heemsoth, who I believe is remote, and then also remote Judy and Steve Pappenfuss. Ms. Fernandez, we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself. The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
My name is Marla Fernandez. I'm addressing you as Marla Fernandez Mediation Group and a paralegal. And I'm here to strongly oppose this joint resolution, which calls for an application to the United States Congress for Article 5 Convention of the States. While the intention behind this resolution may seem noble, I believe that we must first prioritize upholding the Constitution and Bill of Rights before considering to change it. Here are my concerns. Number one, upholding the Constitution. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights already provide a robust framework for protecting individual rights and limiting the powers of the federal government. However, we have seen a failure in recent years by legislators to uphold the foundational documents. What makes us think that amending this Constitution will cure this oversight? Before we propose amendments, we must ensure that our legislators are committed to upholding the Constitution in its current form. Number two, potential risks of an Article 5 convention. Calling for an Article 5 convention of states is a risky endeavor. There is no clear guidelines on how such convention could be conducted, and it could open the door to unintended consequences. There is a real risk that the convention could be hijacked by special interest groups, political agendas, leading to amendments that undermine the principles of liberty and justice enshrined in our Constitution. Number 3, protecting state rights. The Constitution already provides mechanisms protecting state rights, including the 10th Amendment. Rather than calling for a convention that could potentially weaken state rights, we should focus on strengthening the existing safeguards within the Constitution. Number 4, preserving constitutional integrity. The Constitution has served as a bedrock of our republic for over 2 centuries. Any proposed amendment should be carefully considered to ensure that they do not undermine the integrity of our Constitution or our rights as citizens. In conclusion, I believe that our first priority should be to uphold the Constitution and Bill of Rights in their current form. Amending the Constitution should not be taken lightly, and we must ensure that it is done with the utmost care and consideration. I strongly urge you to oppose this bill and instead focus on upholding our existing constitutional principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. Our next witness, please introduce yourself. Floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Eunice Brownlee, and I am the board chair for Colorado Common Cause, a member-driven, nonpartisan nonprofit that works for open, honest, and accountable government, as well as fair and full representation. I am here today to ask you to vote against House Joint Resolution 1024. In 2021, Colorado Common Cause and a coalition of nonpartisan, nonprofit, labor, democracy, and community groups worked to pass a joint resolution which rescinded all previous calls for an Article 5 convention. We continue to oppose all calls for a federal constitutional convention under Article 5 of the US Constitution. While on its face, the idea of a convention sounds appealing, at this point in our nation's history, such a convention would be a threat to our democracy for many reasons, a few of which I will address now. There is nothing in the Constitution to prevent a constitutional convention from being expanded in scope to issues not raised in convention calls passed by the state legislatures and could lead to a runaway convention. This could threaten our constitutional rights to free speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, and the right to privacy, among others. An Article 5 convention would open up the Constitution to revisions at a time of extreme gerrymandering, and in an environment of unlimited political spending, it could allow special interests and the wealthiest to rewrite the rules for governing our democracy. There are currently no rules governing a constitutional convention. A constitutional convention would be opening Pandora's box. The last one was held in 1787 and resulted in a brand new constitution. There is significant risk and danger that opponents of civil liberties could change the scope of the convention and threaten or undermine basic rights long protected by the Constitution. It is unclear how states would choose delegates to a convention and how states and citizens will be represented within a constitutional convention, including who would ultimately vote on items raised in a convention. A convention could redefine the ratification process, currently requiring 38 states to adopt new amendments, to make it easier to pass new amendments, including those considered at the convention. In 1787, this is what happened, changing the threshold necessary for ratification in the conventional process. No judicial, legislative, or executive body would have clear authority to settle disputes about a convention, opening the process to legal chaos that threaten the functioning of our democracy and economy. An Article 5 convention is a dangerous threat to all of us. There are no rules in the US Constitution to protect us from major changes to our constitutional rights. Everything we hold dear, from our right to vote to our right to express free speech, could be up for grabs. We simply cannot trust this risky, untested system where wealthy special interests can easily rig the rules against the American people. In short, the unintended consequences far outweigh the obvious benefits. Please vote no on this resolution. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I welcome any questions.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. We'll go online to Judy Pebenfos.
Thank you. My name's. Turn that down. Whoop. Sorry, there's two of us.
You can sit next to each other if it makes it easier.
Yeah. Hang on.
He needs to turn off his volume.
Sorry, there are two of us wanting to testify here. I think we got onto the wrong panel because I'm in support of the Convention of State. Our Constitution was written many years ago, has withstood so far over 200 years of being in existence. And so I believe that there are rules. It's very clear. President Lincoln and Hamilton wrote about this, supported it, and this is an opportunity for us to look at fiscal responsibility. Most people that I talk to are wondering what's been going on for the last couple of years. Our national debt continues to rise very high, which is concerning. It just went up again almost to $1 trillion. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us to be we the people and actually be involved in the legislative system. I'm seeing in Colorado, we have term limits in Colorado. I truly believe that there should be term limits in Congress. I believe that we get special interests and lobbyists that get involved. So I am very much in support of this. So term limits, financial responsibility, and overreach that I am seeing happen within this state and also within this country. So I am very much in support of having this. It was written into our Constitution, again, which has withstood the test of time so far. I think we're close to possibly losing it for over 200 years. And I'd like to see this. I would like for you to do this. And one of my questions would be, why would you not? Why would you not allow the what our founding fathers developed be able to be involved? Why would Colorado be concerned about that? Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you. We'll go across the room to Steve Pippen first.
Hello, my name's Steve Pappenfuss, and I'm for the Convention of States. One of the problems I've already seen is that people are assuming we're a democracy when we're not. We're a republic. In democracy, a majority rules with their money and their votes. In a republic, everybody has a voice. All states would have a voice. That's what our Constitution, this was the last thing they did during the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Again, this is not, as I understand it, a Constitutional Convention. This is the Convention of States with three, in particular, rules that we want to discuss amongst the states. For one thing is our fiscal responsibility or our national debt that even our grandkids, probably great grandkids, are not going to be able to pay off without some kind of a change, which is not forthcoming from the situation that we have now with no term limits. And that leads into term limits. This is another problem we have. If it's good enough for the presidency, if it's good enough in our own state, then it's good enough for the House and Senate. These states, we also see the difficulty with Texas and their chance, and many other 19 other states that have signed on with Texas, that they agree they have a right to protect their own borders. States have borders, nations should have borders as well. And I think that the only way around this, because clearly those in power right now want to keep their power, is to have a convention of states and see if we can change this to through term limits and limits on the governments, a government of the republic, not of a democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. We'll go next to John Heimsoth.
Can you hear me?
We sure can. Floor's yours for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I was muted there. I am John Heimsoth, and I am opposed to what they call a convention of states and what in reality is a constitutional convention. And I want to read something here, and this was James Madison. He quoted, "If a general convention called by a unanimous consent or by Article 5 were to take place for the avowed and sole purpose of revising the Constitution, an election into it would be courted by the most violent partisans on both sides. It would be, no doubt, contain individuals of insidious views who might have a dangerous opportunity of sapping the very foundation of the fabric." And that was November 1788. And I want to point out also that there is absolutely nowhere in the text of Article 5 does it say or guarantee that the delegates to the convention can only be current or former state legislators. Also, it cannot guarantee that it's going to be one state, one vote, nor can it be limited to a single subject amendment. And as far as term limits go, we have term limits in every election if we have a informed and an engaged electorate. And when we have a lame duck Congress, when they are term limited, they would be not responsible to the electorate. And that is quite obvious even today. And also, I want to point out on the balanced budget amendments back in 1978, President Carter signed into law, Public Law 95-435. Section 7 says, beginning with the fiscal year 1981, the total budget outlays of the federal government shall not exceed its receipts. And on the 23rd of March 2024, United States Code, USC 1103, Congress reaffirms its commitment that budget outlays of the United States government for a fiscal year may be no more than the receipts of the government for that year. And I am asking that you would consider saying no to what is I call a constitutional convention. And I thank you, your honorable committee members and chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel of witnesses? Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Brownlee, are you the only representative of your org that's testifying today?
I was the one that's available, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Epps.
Thank you. You're fantastic. I just didn't know if some of your other folks were here. I've researched and been thinking about this resolution way more than I think is probably necessary, because I'm having a really hard time reconciling principles that are important to me with what the stated outcome that different actors are asking for is. There's a specific thing that I'm struggling with that you mentioned that I would love it if you could help me untangle. I keep hearing folks who are opposed to this say, reference the current political climate, gerrymandering, I mean, all the things that we could fill in to say the current climate. Help me understand how, if you were hypothetically, a 40-year-old Black woman, how is the political climate in this moment more or less dangerous than what a similarly situated woman would have been facing the first time around? And I know there's like lots of ifs there, but I keep hearing that as the argument about how things are. And I just can't reconcile how is that something that would propel that hypothetical woman to vote one way or the other.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you for that question, Representative Epps. It's a question that I have struggled with as well. Given what Mr. Heimsoth testified as well, is there are no rules, which means it's up for grabs. It's a free for all. Who's to say that I would or would not have a voice at that table? The current political climate right now does not guarantee me that any more than it did in 1787. It's really, given the current history, is this isn't the time or place to test that, because we are absolutely subverting the process of the state's rights in ratifying individual amendments one at a time. We don't need to overhaul the whole entire Constitution at once. Even though this is a limited scope, there's no rules, as it's been spoken about, to prohibit that scope from remaining limited.
Representative Epps. Any follow-up? Representative Parenti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on your comment, Ms. Brownlee, about no rules. We've talked a little bit about how there's no rules for adding new subjects, and we've heard our bill sponsor talk about, well, Colorado would only be subject to these 3. But what about rules for representation at the convention? Not only in terms of what we heard one of our witnesses say, who goes, how many go, how many from each state go, how many is 2/3? Is it 2/3 of the total people who go, 2/3 of the state? Like, can you just talk a little bit about that environment, I guess, for lack of a better word as well? Thank you.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Representative Parenti. Oh, that's a tongue twister. The fact is that the Article 5 of the Constitution does not dictate anything. There are no guidelines, there are no rules, there are no current parameters around which this could operate. We don't know. We haven't tested it before, and I just don't think that this is the time that we want to be testing that. It could be a free-for-all, and that's when we talk about a runaway convention. We just want to make sure that it's not just sending people out not knowing what they can expect or how this process could go. It is very possible that Colorado only shows up and is authorized to participate in these 3 very clear and very distinct buckets, but it's not to say that the rest of the coalition doesn't also band together and bring in others, and now we have no voice.
Representative Wilford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question is for anyone that can answer it. How would the rules be set? Who would be responsible for setting the parameters of a state's or a convention of the states?
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you. I'll the best answer that I can give is that I don't have a specific answer. We don't know. And our intention really here is to make sure that we're not subverting states' rights to participate in ratifying individual amendments.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for you as well. Thank you for being here. I think when we think about a convention of states, I mean, I think first of mind and top of mind for folks is the civil liberties that are guaranteed through our existing constitution and how that plays out. I think one of the things I want to ask you about, however, is the implications of putting everything into play. And when you do that, what does the mean for the impact on stability, on markets, on the economy? Because when you put all the rules, or at least I think the largest rules in play in terms of our Constitution, or the potential for that to be the case, or at least you inject uncertainty into that space, I imagine the political dynamic to be fraught, and I imagine the implications for our economy to be serious.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Representative Bosenecker. I am not an economist and I am not an attorney, so I can't speak to the specific ramifications. All I can say is because it's a free-for-all, it's anyone's game. Anyone could make the rules, and whoever is going to be running the show is going to be who makes the rules that are going to be most favorable to them.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. And just one quick follow-up. In your, and I am not an economist either, but I'm just going to extrapolate some principles that I think are true here. In your experience, has uncertainty ever been favorable to the market?
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you. In my experience, uncertainty has not been a favorable outcome to the markets.
Thank
you. Any further questions for this panel of witnesses? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We're now going to go to witnesses who have signed up in a support position. We have received a list from the resolution sponsor, and we are going to do our best to adhere to it. If we can call up Teresa Platt, William Rutledge, Scott Carlisle, and Wayne Walverud. And also Michael Ferris remote. we have Michael Ferris online? We're going to go with him first. All right, thank you. Dr. Ferris, online, can you kick us off? Please introduce yourself.
Sure.
Floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My name is Michael Ferris. I am an attorney. I've taught constitutional law at the collegiate level for 17 years. I have litigated constitutional appellate cases all over the country, including the Supreme Court of the United States. And I have litigated cases under Article 5, the amending process of the Constitution, in a case that began in the 70s and concluded in the early 80s. I can answer probably any of the questions that have been asked about the procedure of this. I am the co-founder of the Convention of States project. And so I'll just begin to address the questions about a runaway convention. There have been 450 applications for a convention of the states, and that is the correct historical terminology, and I'll explain what the difference is between a convention of states and a constitutional convention. A convention of states called under Article 5 can only propose specific amendments. Congress has the same exact power every day. It can propose amendments the same way. Under a convention of states, what it means is this delegates are picked by the states and they are regulated by the state legislature. The question answer, who picks the delegates? The answer is each state legislature picks their own delegates. How do they vote? At every stage, it's one state, one vote. It takes 34 states to agree on the topics for a convention. It takes 26 states at the convention, a simple majority, to agree on any particular applications that will be voted on. Every amendment, just like the Bill of Rights, there were 12 amendments proposed in the Bill of Rights. 10 were originally ratified. 200 years later, we ratified one more of them. And so, but they're voted on one by one. So that part of it. And then every stage, 26, 34, 26, 38, it's one state, one vote. So Colorado could send whatever number, we would recommend 5 or 7 delegates from your state, chosen by the state legislature, but they would individually caucus as a state and cast Colorado's one vote. Every state would be in the same exact process. Why can this not run away? The rule that there has to be an agreement on the topic has been proven by the history. Precedents are established not only by court cases, but by the history of the behavior of Congress and the state legislatures. Congress has never called a convention, even though there's been way more than 34 states that have applied for a convention in the states, because there's never been an agreement of 2/3 of the states on the topic. Because it requires 38 states to ratify whatever comes out of convention, the idea that we could adopt anything that's crazy on any subject just makes no sense at all. It's impossible to get 38 states to ratify crazy ideas. I see my 3 minutes are up, but I literally can answer all of your questions about the process that you'd like to ask me.
Great, thank you. Please hold for questions. We're going to go with our witnesses who are here. Sir, please state your name for the record and kick us off. Floor is yours for 3 minutes.
My name is Wayne Wellbord, Honorable Chairman and the committee. My name is Wayne Wellbord. I live in Brighton, Colorado. Gabe Evans is my House District 48 representative with tools learned in my formative years as a banker, certified management consultant, a computer programmer, and now a young 80 years old. I am going to call a call to action at the end of this. But first, a quote from the writer of Article 5, George Mason. He is the architect of Article 5. And I quote from him, "All power is lodged in and consequently derived from the people. We should wear it as a breastplate and buckle it as armor." Today, my goal is to pay it forward. The wisdom that I have gained as a Peace Corps volunteer in 1964 to 1968 when I left Kabul, Afghanistan, and I traveled in 35 plus countries and spoke 4 languages. I have enjoyed life's many, many gifts. good family upbringing in Denver in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. One brother, two sisters, one sister, two brothers, married, 4 children, 14 grandchildren. I've been in Colorado Convention of the States for over 6 years. Many leadership positions. Today, I represent 6 House districts as regional captain. They are 48, 56, 31, 32, 33, 34 as the active person in training. With what I have learned, today we seek to implement our constitutional rights under Article 5. This requires you, our constitutional rights under Article 5, and requires the House representatives, you, to call a convention of states. My point, America is the greatest, freedom-loving, religiously tolerant nation to ever exist. I've been there. Allow the full House of your other representatives the opportunity to vote Convention of States, Article 5. So we, the people, simply ask everybody in Colorado have a chance to read our 3 topics, as Mr. Ferris said. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any questions?
Please hold for questions. Okay, next we'll go to our next witness, Ms. Platt.
Thank you, Committee Chairman, for having this hearing. My name is Teresa Platt, and I've been in Colorado Springs for 25 years now, and I'm currently in House District 15 with Representative Scott Bottoms. My family has fought for this country in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. 2 men have given their all in the Civil War and World War II. They did not put their lives on the line only to watch the power of the federal government take from the people the freedoms they fought and died for. The founding fathers of this nation understood the corruption a federal government can acquire, so had limited the power of each branch. Over time, each branch has stepped out of their boundaries and responsibilities. The Convention of States resolution will bring back the limited power that was given in the Constitution by limiting their overall power, including fiscal restraints, and giving them term limits so they can focus on what they were elected for. The Declaration of Independence states that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they were endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments were instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Compromising our unalienable rights, thinking that it makes things easier or better for us and our children, can backfire in a big way. Parents who make compromises can end up alienating themselves from their children and in some cases be hated by them. Is that what you want? It was my grandfather that died fighting for me and for you in World War II. Help us continue to leave a legacy for our children and our grandchildren that is worth fighting and dying for. Please vote to move the Convention of States Resolution HJR 24-1024 out of the committee and to the House for full debate and vote. Thank you, House, State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee for allowing me to speak here today.
Thank you so much. We can hear from our next witness. I think you need to hit your button, sir. There we go.
Good morning, or afternoon, I guess it is now. My name is Scott Carlisle. I'm from Uray County, and we are here to discuss the Convention of the States, not a constitutional convention, which has been mentioned. We are all Americans here, and it matters not which side of the aisle you stand. Each of us, our citizens here today, is living proof of the dedication of previous generations' choice to put our well-being ahead of their own. Today, I ask you to remember their gifts of freedom that we are all now enjoying. Today, with all the debt created by the power-grabbing federal government and the career politicians, we the people must choose to change course of the actions of our federal government. Today, I humbly request that you adopt the Convention of the States resolution, which is in front of you, so all of our children and grandchildren can live as freely as we have. The most obvious need for the adoption of this resolution at this point in time is to return states' rights to defend and protect their citizens. This can only happen if the federal government is required to honor the 10th Amendment. With the current insane printing of money, complete lack of fiscal responsibility demonstrated by the federal government, and the lack of budgets passed, only 4 in the last 40 years, it is crystal clear that we, the people, need this convention of the states to help us clean up the national mess that's been created by our federal government. When you vote to pass this resolution of the Convention of States articles, you as an American, a representative of the people, a neighbor, a father, a mother, a grandparent, will be demonstrating your love of country and respect for all that has been given to you as an American citizen. I pray that you will stand on your sacred honor just as our founding fathers did, to uphold the sworn oath you've taken to protect and defend the Constitution. Your vote to convene the Convention of States to debate and resolve the issues we have before us as a nation. You sit here before God and country with a historical opportunity to protect and defend the greatest nation on earth by voting yes to convening the Convention of the States. May God bless each and every one of you in the United States of America. I thank you for your time investing in listening to me, and I'm a proud, God-fearing American who honors the gift of American freedoms. It's been my honor to speak to all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. Mr. Rutledge.
Mr. Chair, honorable representatives, good afternoon. My name is Bill Rutledge. I'm 71. I live outside of Eaton in Weld County, House District 63. I have lived in Colorado off and on since the 50s. As a retired Air Force officer and middle school teacher, I sit here before you today to testify to my support of this resolution because those whom we have placed in the federal system have failed to act on issues that would restrict their political tenure, limit their influence on state issues, and control budget spending. The question before you today is, where do you personally stand in your beliefs about balanced budgets, federal overreach in state matters, and career politicians? Our forefathers believed in a limited federal government. The present day system is anything but limited. They foresaw a time when amendments proposed by a convention of states would be the only way for the sovereign states to address the human behaviors influenced by power, control, and greed. We have today signs of a dysfunctional and corrupt infestation of ideologies and actions in Congress that rip at the moral fabric of our society and instigate fear through false narratives in support of endless wars. James A. Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, stated in 1881, "Now more than ever, the people are responsible for the character of their Congress. If that body be ignorant, reckless, and corrupt, it is because the people tolerate ignorance, recklessness, and corruption." I respectfully ask that each of you support the spirit of the resolution on behalf of our founders and your constituents, we, the people of Colorado. It is your constitutional right and your duty to explore every option to rein in and redirect the behaviors of our federal representatives. In closing, let your actions reflect the strength of character to have an open, honest, and expanded discussion on the floor of Colorado's House of Representatives. Do not carry the burden of your decision alone today. We, the people before you today, humbly request your vote for support. Thank you for listening, and may God's hand guide your decision.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel of witnesses? Representative Bottoms.
It can be for any of you, but I choose to go to my district first, just out of deference and votes. So I do like everything about this, except for the one thing I probably will ask every group. How can you guarantee that once we get to that convention of states, that this doesn't, that first, that we even actually accomplish anything? I mean, we fight over everything in our country. Both sides go at each other on everything. How do we guarantee that doesn't happen? And then if somehow we get to some kind of a discussion, a legitimate discussion, how do we limit it our state is limited to these three things, but how do we limit it? How do we guarantee that when we get to that place?
Let's go with Ms. Platt.
The way I understand it, they're, when they represent, the three listed there, that's, to my understanding, that limits it right there, because that's what we're selecting, that's what we're asking the vote for. So that limits it for this. It's not like they can just bring anything in once they get there. This is what's been voted for throughout the country, so that's what it would be. And once it's in there and, they would vote for it, it still has to go through all of the states to be ratified. So that's where it limits it too, because even if what they vote for in there, if the states decide they don't want it, they don't amend it, it doesn't change anything.
Any follow-up, Representative Bottoms?
Yeah, I think so. Let me let somebody else add to that.
May I add, Mr. Chair?
Dr. Ferris online.
Sure. The reason that you can't, that the convention cannot go outside the three subjects is, first of all of the 19 states that have passed this resolution have passed it in exactly the same form that Colorado is being asked. The three things are exactly the same. And so it will be 34 states coming together on this exact three things. If there's resolutions on other things, they don't aggregate. California has recently passed resolutions on other topics. That doesn't count. That can't come up at this convention. If 34 states join, 33 other states join with California on wanting to reverse Citizens United, then you can have a convention on that topic. But you're limited to the topic that the 34 states agreed to. So it's not just Colorado, all the states that are coming will be coming under that rule. Now, how do we know you can't change the rules in the middle of the stream? There's a litigation answer and there's a historical answer. Congress tried to change the rules for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. It was sent out to the states with a 7-year deadline. I litigated that case when I was a very young lawyer on behalf of Washington state legislators. And the ruling of the federal district court in that time, and that ruling has been reaffirmed in the last couple of years by federal appellate courts, have said you can't change the rules in the middle of the stream. The program that you were sent out for, the deadline you were sent out for, that's binding through the end. Once you call it, once it's in motion, the rules cannot change. So you can litigate the answer. There also is a historical answer. At the original convention, the states told their delegates what they could do and not do. For example, New York's delegates were told all three of you have to be present in order to vote. And so they're in the middle of the original constitutional convention. Two of the delegates from New York got upset with the way things were going and they left. New York never voted again because they had to follow the rules. Alexander Hamilton stayed and debated. He was not allowed to vote because those were the rules set by New York at the time. And so there is a combination of all the states set the subject matter, and then individual states can also direct their delegates on how they can behave and how they can cast their votes. And so there's a combination of state legislative control and the original control set by the topic. And you can't change the rules in the middle of the stream. Litigation would happen instantly if that was attempted. And beyond that, there's the ultimate check that's already been referenced. 38 states have to ratify. So the idea that 38 states would have to ratify in some, repeal the First Amendment, repeal the Second Amendment, just cannot possibly happen in a political sense. It's a political impossibility as well as being illegal. Now, as to the idea that you could change the ratification process, I wrote an article about this. It's published in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, one of the law reviews published at Harvard University. It's called Defying Conventional Wisdom. It goes through entirely how the original Constitutional Convention worked, including the part about how they changed the method of ratification. The method of ratification was changed in this fashion. They sent it to the Articles of Confederation of Congress, as they were required to do under the Articles of Confederation. It unanimously approved the new process. Then it was sent to the state legislatures. the state legislatures unanimously, all 13 states, before the Constitutional Convention process was finished, they unanimously approved the new methodology of sending to conventions with a new methodology of state ratification conventions and a new voting rule as well, 9 states rather than 13 states. So the process was changed unanimously by the old system before it was used in the new system. So the idea that it can be changed willy-nilly is just nonsense. This would be called under the Article 5 of the Constitution, not under a general convention. The quote was read by Madison, was talking about a general convention. Nobody wants a general convention. A general convention is wide open. Madison didn't want one. We don't want one. Nobody in this room today wants a general convention. And that would be indeed a dangerous thing. But this is a specific convention called on specific topics. It's an amendments convention. It's just a way for the states to propose amendments. And the reason that you're given this power is, George Mason said, someday the federal government is going to abuse its authority. And when that day happens, it's going to be because the states need the authority to change the Constitution, to rein the federal government in, because they'll never do it themselves. And in 200 and plus years of history have proven that to be true. And so what we have now is the reason we have this debt is not just because Congress has spent way too much money. It's because the state legislatures, who are effectively in the role of parents in this situation, haven't stopped their kids from using the credit card until they spin us into oblivion. And you have the authority as state legislatures to stop the national debt going on in this way. And you hold the moral responsibility because you have the legal authority to stop them. And if you don't, you are ultimately even more responsible than your profligate children in Congress doing this. And so I would just simply urge you, my wife and I have 10 children. I understand what would happen if you let your kids go for 18 years and never discipline them. We have seen what has happened when we go for 200 plus years and the states have never disciplined Congress by reining in their authority. This is the time to do it.
Thank you, Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I have a question for Mr. Ferris. Is it Dr. Ferris?
It is Dr. Ferris.
It's Mr. Ferris. I was the president of an undergraduate college. And in that,
Gotcha.
Era,
Sir, we only have 90 seconds.
Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. I realize you can't see us. I just want to ask you very quickly, do you find, I'm thinking about the 17th Amendment, which is something I just do a lot in my free time. And I wonder if you find persuasive any argument around a reason to be cautiously open to this proposal being a potential prodding effect, thinking back to how inactive Congress was on a change around how we determine who our U.S. senators are. Is there a possibility that a prodding effect could happen?
Mr. Ferris, and I'm going to just flag for everybody, we have about 50 seconds left for this panel, so expediency is the gift to us.
Okay. The 17th Amendment indeed was prompted by getting close to having 2/3 of the states. And so it could happen that if we got close to 2/3 on these issues, Congress might finally do something right and propose things on a balanced budget and other kinds of limitations. It could happen, yes.
We have time for one last question. Rep. Wilford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I'll be able to get my question out in 18 seconds. Is that okay? Okay, I'm going to just give my best shot. My question is for the gentleman on the screen there. I'm sorry, I don't think I've got your name. It might be Ferris, Mr. Ferris. So I understand that you're the founder of this organization. And I guess I'm trying to better understand the background of your organization, because as I'm looking right now, it seems like the roots of this organization are pretty far right. And as I look on this overview of who you all are, I see that you are supported by self-proclaimed conservative legal heavyweights, as well as folks like Marco Rubio and Glenn Beck and Sean Hannity and Ben Carson and Mike Huckabee and Sarah Palin and Ben Shapiro, I mean, I could go on and on here. And then when I look at the fact that you all have a independent expenditure filed with the Colorado Secretary of State in the last election season and financially backed 15 out of the 19, well, I guess the mighty 19 Republicans that are currently serving, I'm a little concerned that your organization is going to be able to um, represent the diversity of America in this effort that you're putting forward. And so, I guess I just want to ask, like, what guarantee do the American people have that this effort is going to be truly fair and representative? Because the other piece I am concerned about is the concept of the one state, one vote, when Colorado has 5.84 million people and Wyoming has 576,000 people, yet we would get the same voting power. So hoping that you can speak specifically to those points.
Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to answer. I will be as quick as I can. Colorado would have the same vote not only as Wyoming, but of California that has many, many, many more times the vote of Colorado. It's how we vote on ratifying amendments. 38 states, 34 states have to agree. So it's one state, one vote. The guarantee of the representation is the Convention of States project is conservative in its background. But recently in a Pennsylvania poll was done, this has wide bipartisan support at the grassroots level. And ultimately, its representative character is defined by you all. The Colorado legislature would appoint your delegates. You get to decide, and so California's delegates will represent California. Wyoming's delegates will represent the character of that state, and so on. And so our organization will have no role in that. It will be the state legislatures that take over. They appoint the delegates, they write the rules, they will run the whole show. And we would be the match that helped start the fire, perhaps, but we will not control it. The state legislatures will.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, witnesses. We appreciate your time today. We're going to call up another panel of witnesses here. This is going to be a relatively small panel. I think we have two folks, both in person, Mark Farmer and Sharon Vinci, and you'll correct me on the pronunciation of the last name. Great. Thanks so much for being here today. We'll start on my left, your right. The floor is yours for 3 minutes. You'll just need to push the little button at the base of your microphone and please proceed.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members for your time and service. My name is Sharon Vinci. I live in Commerce City, District 8. I was blessed to grow up in this country with parents honed by the Depression and determined their children would have it better than they did. The first of my family to attend college, I advanced in a business career that allowed me to raise 2 children as a single mother. As a grandmother now, I'm angry about the country that we're handing over to the next generation. I'm not alone. This generation deserves better, like my grandson, who alongside others deploys to the Middle East next month with the Colorado Army National Guard. For far too long, we've witnessed the damage that an unchecked federal bureaucracy can do. And although people are outraged about national debt, the southern border, and other crises, they feel powerless to do much about it. But the fact is that there's something that we can all do about it. We can use the life raft that our founding fathers gave us in Article 5 of the Constitution. That article was explicitly written for times like today, when the federal government is no longer the solution, but the problem. It's likely the last peaceful tool that our states will have to reclaim their sovereignty and restore a balance of power between them and the federal government. Article 5 requires that 34 state legislatures pass a resolution in each chamber of their legislatures, after which a delegate from all 50 states will meet to discuss and pass amendments that address agreed upon subjects, term limits, fiscal responsibility, and federal restraint. Today, over half of the required number of states have passed this resolution, and we pray that Colorado will join that team. Please, let's do this for our children and our grandchildren. Please vote to move this resolution out of committee and to the House for a full debate and a vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Vinci. Next, Mr. Farmer. The floor is yours for 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself and if you represent anybody.
Thank you. My name is Mark Farmer, and I'm a concerned citizen of Colorado. I urge you to pass this resolution under consideration out of this committee. It is important that all representatives have the opportunity to thoroughly debate not only this resolution, but also the procedures of an Article 5 Convention of States. After the threshold of 34 states is reached, the Convention of States will be called, and Colorado will be invited to participate. It is crucial that the representatives of the state of Colorado be prepared for this convention, regardless of your stance on this resolution. I don't believe I'm overstating my case when I say it is your duty to best represent the people of Colorado by thoroughly understanding this resolution and the workings of an Article 5 Convention of States.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, we have 2 witnesses in front of us. Any questions for this panel? Seeing none, we thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today. We'll call up our next panel, a mix of remote and in person. We have Guy Richter, remote, Carla Pendleton, remote, and I believe in person, John Grabowski and Janine Winslow. If you're in the room, come on forward. Oh, and I'm sorry, Mr. Michael Raish as well. If you're here, please come on forward. Mr. Raish, while you're getting settled, we'll start here with Ms. Pendleton. Please introduce yourself. Floor is yours for 2 minutes. If you represent an organization, please let us know.
I'm Carla Pendleton, House District 59.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pendleton, I'm going to have you hold for 1 second. I've got Ms. Winslow in front of us, and I'm going to get better at reading my list. We'll come to you in just 1 second, Ms. Pendleton. Ms. Winslow, please proceed. 3 minutes.
Hello, committee members, and thank you for your service. My name is Janine Winslow, and I live in District 6, Littleton. We are all first and foremost Americans, but America is in trouble. We face serious threats abroad, and at home our borders have been overrun. In 2023 alone, 2.5 million immigrants entered our country illegally. What is that costing the American taxpayer? Add to that inflation. And where are our leaders in all of this? Some Congress members have served for over 30 years, and yet, with all that experience, they can't agree on anything and are certainly not addressing our problems. Americans are tapped out. For far too long, Congress has been in charge of overseeing Congress. That's like the fox guarding the henhouse. In 1951, Congress established term limits for the president, but they will not rein themselves in. Another example of our unmanaged federal government is our national debt. Both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have and continue to overspend the federal budget. We are headed for a debt crisis, and soon. Our severely dysfunctional Congress requires a severe intervention. Our founding fathers saw this unfortunate day coming, which is why they included Article 5 in the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 gives states the power to call a convention to propose amendments. I support the conventions of state action. This particular convention would stipulate that the states discuss amendments that limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints, and place term limits on federal officials. These are basic but essential restraints, critical for the future well-being of our country and for its citizens. I will end with this quote by Neil A. Maxwell. Do not let the future be held hostage by the past. I urge you to vote to move the resolution out of committee into the House for a full debate and vote. Thanks again for your time and your service.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. Next witness, please introduce yourself if you're representing an organization, and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm John Grabowski. I live in House District 39. I'm from Larkspur, Colorado, and we are ably represented by the distinguished Brandy Bradley in the House. Two quick things. One, there was a lot of questions about the rules, who appoints, who, that whole process. To follow on what Michael Ferris had to say, out of the 19 states that have passed this resolution, 12 of them have adopted model legislation on how they will select, vet, appoint, and commission delegates to the convention. I've read all of them. There are 2 more states that have under the legislation under consideration. And what struck me is how brief it is, how very direct, how very specific, and how the responsibility for selecting and charging delegates is across the spectrum. So as he said, it's you, the legislators, that control that process as well as the rules in the convention. So I appreciate those questions being asked, and I appreciate your effort to learn more about COS. Now, indulge me. The federal government in 1651, famous philosopher Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan. Now, Leviathan refers to a mythological monstrous creature, one of which, the whale, reportedly swallowed Jonah, as described in the Old Testament of the Bible. Hobbes firmly believed that the most necessary and effective civil government was one ruled by an absolute sovereign. And here's how both Leviathan and sovereign were described by a scholar at the time: a unity compacted out of separate individuals. They are omnipotent. They cannot be destroyed or divided. They inspire fear in men. They do not make pacts with men. Theirs is the dominion of power, of pain, of death. I posit to you that this is an apt description of the current federal government. It has grown in size, scope, and function well beyond what was intended in our U.S. Constitution. Our first president, George Washington, had 4 cabinet-level positions. Today, we have 15, plus 15 independent federal agencies. It has become all-encompassing in our lives, with unelected bureaucrats regulating every aspect of our existence, from how our toilets flush to what we are allowed to think and say. It's time to pull it back to its original enumerated powers, especially for Congress. See Article 1, Section 88. I implore the members to vote this resolution out of committee and sent to the full House for debate and vote. And lest I forget, happy Earth Day.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Please hold for questions. Next witness.
Thank you, members of this committee, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Michael Raish. I am a Colorado native who lives in Arvada, House District 24. I attended the University of Colorado and have enjoyed a long career as a CPA and CFO. I am here today representing myself, my children, and my grandchildren. I am speaking in support of the Convention of States resolution as provided for in Article 5 of the United States Constitution because of the power that it invests in the people of this country. Our founders were wise to allow such a provision. They knew, as everyone in this hearing room knows, that too much power can lead to well-meaning civil servants into believing that they could fix every problem if they just had more money, more time, and more power. Unfortunately, it is just that type of thinking that has brought us to where we are today, with an out-of-control federal debt, a government run by career politicians in Washington, D.C. who spend too much time raising funds for their next election and not enough time solving problems that they campaigned on. The Convention of States resolution before you is a nonpartisan effort that seeks to impose fiscal restraints on needless federal spending and to propose term limits at the federal level. These are concepts that you, as our legislature in Colorado, have been wise enough to create here. I urge you to support the Convention of States resolution and allow for fiscal responsibility, common sense, and liberty to improve our country for the benefit of all people. Allow Colorado to participate with the rest of the country to prove to founders that we are worthy of the trust that they placed in us through Article 5. Please pass this resolution from this committee onto the House floor so that the democratic process can live on as provided for by our founders. Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this very important subject. All we are asking for is to allow the democratic process of debate to continue to the next level and not to die in this hearing room. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raish. Let's go online now. Ms. Pendleton, thanks for your patience. The floor is now yours for 3 minutes. And it looks like you're muted, ma'am. Don't think we can hear you yet.
Carla, get it.
Can you hear me now?
We've got you.
Yes.
Floor is yours for
Thank you
3.
so much. I'm Carla Pendleton from House District 59. I serve as the grassroots coordinator for Colorado Convention of States Action. A catastrophe befell my tiny hometown of Silverton in San Juan County. In 2015, millions of gallons of stinking, toxic wastewater were released by a federal agency, overriding local authorities and drilling into a closed mine bulkhead. Thank God no lives were lost, but damage to our beautiful county was sustained and still remains. In 1984, the U.S. Supreme Court granted unprecedented and unconstitutional power to the administrative state, allowing unelected bureaucrats to wield legislative authority. This decision has eroded the vital checks and balances of our constitutional republic for over 4 decades. The Constitution vests all legislative authority in an elected Congress, not the courts, not the executive, and certainly not an unconstitutional fourth branch. Under this ruling, federal agencies were empowered to create law using the misguided notion that they possess superior expertise. The environmental catastrophe in San Juan County serves as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked federal agencies and their impact on we, the people of Colorado. The administrative state now operates as an unchecked tyranny. The consequences of this tyranny are felt daily in San Juan County, where over 90% of the land is controlled by unelected and unaccountable federal agencies. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution places the final check upon federal tyranny with you, federal or state legislators. I urge you to support HJR 24-1024, moving it to the House floor for debate by those elected to make a law in Colorado. My final question is this: will the Colorado General Assembly continue to tolerate the tyranny of the federal administrative state, or will Colorado state legislators step up and provide a check on such tyranny? Thank you for your thoughtfully considered answer.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, let's go to Mr. Richter. Floor is yours for 3, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to testify. My name is Guy Richter. This could be the most important decision that you've ever made, committee members. I've lived in State House District 60 for 31 years, and I ask that my voice be heard. Our country is in crisis due to a government that has become bloated, corrupt, reckless, and invasive. We must reverse our path of destruction now. I ask that you carefully consider Article 5 of the Constitution as a solution to our problems. This important article is written to ensure the sovereignty and self-governance of we the people. It is a valuable tool for maintaining the balance of power between states and the federal government. Article 5 provides each state the authority to call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. These amendments would focus on 3 areas of government that are deeply corrupt and terribly inept. Number 1 is money. Impose fiscal restraints on the government. It's unethical and irresponsible to burden our children with massive debt. The reckless spending of our tax money has to stop. Number two is power. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. We have slowly lost our freedom in many ways. It is government who controls, it's not government who controls the people, it's we the people that control our government. And the third area is time. Set term limits on Congress, federal officials, and especially non-elected appointed bureaucrats. Term limits will allow future generations to govern themselves instead of being governed by the ghosts of politicians long gone. In conclusion, I only ask that the Convention of States resolution be passed out of your committee onto the floor for discussion, where all Colorado residents will have a voice. This is the democratic process that we value so much. Listen carefully to the compelling testimony of those in support of this resolution, then make your decision based on the people's voice, not party lines, as it should be. Thank you for allowing me to testify, and thank you for your service to Colorado.
Thank you. Please hold for questions. Committee, we've got 2 folks online, 3 in person. Questions for this panel of witnesses. Representative Bradley.
Thank you. And John, thank you for the shout out. My friend listening said that you gave me an amazing one. I'm sorry I had to step away. Child problem. My question is for you, and the representative across the aisle talked about this being kind of a Republican or a conservative thing. And I would argue that teachers unions only give to 46 members of our state house and not to the mighty 19. So my question for you is this a Democrat thing or a Republican thing? Because I'm looking at the survey that you handed out and it's blue states, red states, Democrats, unaffiliated Republicans. Just wondering if you could speak to that.
Mr. Grabowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And by the way, thank you for allowing me to give testimony. I think I forgot to say that. Randy, thanks for the question. Up front, we say we are nonpartisan. Common Cause said that they were nonpartisan as well. I'll take that at face value. For us, the issues we're dealing with cuts across all party lines and all political parties. It's the fundamental right of we the people. And regardless of what party you're in, you are one of we the people. And if you think about the impacts that we are of the federal government that we're trying to fight, we're all on the receiving end of them. Think of mandates, spending mandates out of the federal government. Does that not take away state authority and sovereignty? Think about in term limits. You all in this legislature have term limits. They've been in place, I think, 32 years, and I don't think anybody's ever tried to reverse them. It's 31 or 32 years. Why in the states but not in the federal government? Term limits. That cuts across all parties. And when you think about the spending, again, we have Tabor and we have other restrictions on spending in this state. Why is it that the federal government, Congress, has none, has no effective controls? So that's how I answer this. This is about common sense, government by we the people, government by consent of the governed. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Further questions for this panel of witnesses? Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for the same gentleman from who's so ably represented. We like that phrase.
Yes.
I am with you on the whole arc of what you're saying about what should be nonpartisan, taking at face value,
Gotcha.
et cetera. I really am. I know we don't know each other and haven't had a chance to get to know each other yet, but of the more absurd things I am regularly accused of, one is following party lines. And it makes me chuckle because they actually did the math and I vote not along party lines more than anyone else. So that's my backdrop to ask you to really believe me with what I'm asking you. It's really uncommon that I can't find anybody aligned with me on many of the issues who can also be with me on an issue. And in this one, I really researched and looked for not just a progressive group, but like a legislator, an elected, a firebrand, someone who aligns with my worldview, who could give me some comfort that, this isn't, that this is not as scary as it looks when What I want to say, sir, is rarely is my party so, not the members here, but the public discourse, what you find online, rarely are they so aligned against something. And I want you to tell me, someone who is also supports term limits, I do, right? Someone who is outside of that mold of the relative right or the libertarian group who supports this,
Okay.
please.
Well, um,
Mr. Grabowski,
yes, I apologize.
You're fine.
I'm new at this.
all
Okay,
good.
thank
We're
you.
glad you're here.
Wonderful question. And I wish I had a really convincing answer for you. However, it the Democrats, and I've been at this for 10 years, but as an activist, 3.5 years, you all are tough. Um, I'm the legislative liaison to the legislature, fancy name for lobbyist for COS here in Colorado. In the last 3 years, I've had maybe 6 or 7 Democrats that have given me an audience. Okay. Why that is, I do point to the National Party. They're opposed to this whole idea. However, there are those who have gotten very curious and talked to us, typically on things like term limits or the budget. Not so sure about this. What do you mean pull back the power of the federal government? It has been a slog, but I will tell you recently, let's see, 3 states, and I might have to call on my buddy back here, Hawaii and Massachusetts. What was the third one where we got it moved out of committee with the support of the Democrats on the committee? Now, Hawaii is not a red state, neither is Massachusetts. What was the third one? And we're making progress, and it just comes from years of attempting to get in and make our case. I will tell you that usually what gets me into somebody's office or gets a response is, do you know in House District XYZ that you have 981 COS petition signers? Better yet, when we get up over 1,000 and there's 14 or 1,500 petition signers in a House district, and remember, you have roughly, 40,000 voters, and 60% of them show up at an election. My question is, why wouldn't you want to hear from your constituents? I'm just a lobbyist. I don't live in your district. And it's, I don't know what it is other than, this is, even though it's been in the Constitution from the beginning, it's a pretty radical idea to a lot of people. And yeah, we tend to come from the right, the Republicans. We've gotten great support from the Mighty 19 and several of the people in the Senate, and we cherish that. But we're really eager to talk to everybody in the legislature, and that's what I've been trying to do for the last 3.5 years. And I hope I didn't overspeak that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Further questions for this panel? Seeing none, we thank you for your time.
Are we done?
Our next panel will call up 3 in-person witnesses, Norman Olson, Laird Thomas, and Vivian Garcia. If you're here, please come on forward. Great. We'll start here on my left with Ms. Garcia. If you'll introduce yourself, if you represent an organization, and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Colorado representatives. I'm grateful to testify before the House State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee today. My name is Vivian Garcia. I'm 48 years old. I was born in Pueblo. I'm a mom and a grandma, and I've resided in Colorado my entire life. I live in Centennial House District 38, represented by David Ortiz. I'm taking the time to be here because the federal government has abused authority, pursuing the people's money without accountability or evidence of lasting and stable results for American citizens that government was created to serve. Excuse me. U.S. congressional terms of service should not be decided by the incumbent and their own interests and abilities. Congressional terms should be decided by United States citizens through a constitutional amendment. U.S. senators and representatives, unlimited incumbency defends the incumbent, not democracy. Incumbency builds power and influence, and their status secures exposure, which in turn creates name and face recognition. Senior positions in U.S. Congress make more money. The people who take on these roles do not want to let go of these roles well past the normal retirement age. Decades spent in Congress means more separation from their constituents, the citizens whom they represent. They learn the game, and whatever bond they originally had relating to their constituents, that bond fades, and they become institutionalized salesmen who know how to win and are experts on how to sell. I support a constitutional amendment to term limit U.S. Congress through an Article 5 Convention of States within this resolution, HJR 24-1024. And I believe with debate, the states can come to a winning compromise that could get ratified by 38 states. As state legislators, you have been given the power and authority under Article 5 to participate in this process. To shut down the matter for another body of state legislators in another year only removes yourselves from the authority to be part of appointing the Article 5 Convention of States commissioners that would represent Colorado. Please vote yes today to send House Resolution HJR 24-1024 to the floor for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Please hold for questions. We'll go to the next witness. Please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I want to
And
talk
if you
about
could just
term
introduce
limits.
yourself
My
first.
name is Laird
Thank you.
Thomas. I'm fourth generation Colorado native living in District 52 in Fort Collins, Colorado. My thanks to the chair and representatives for hearing testimony for passing the resolution out of committee and into the House for votes. A majority of voters in the state and nationally agree term limits are good for the nation. Ben Franklin said about term limits, when politicians know they will return to society and live under laws passed when in Congress, they will think carefully about long-term effects of programs they supported. Term limits are necessary to prevent power from becoming centralized in the hands of a few for decades on end. It's recognized that 93% of all House incumbents and 82% of all Senate incumbents have been reelected since 1964. Without term limits, our local, state, and national governing bodies become hunting grounds for lobbyists, ripe for corruption and fraud. That betrays the voters' confidence. So what can term limits do to prevent this? Term limits would give voters more influence with their vote, bringing in new people with new ideas and new perspectives. Newly elected officials could have the courage to focus on doing the job voters hired them to do, rather than the planning for the next election cycle. In conclusion, term limits would encourage the people to take back their power and have confidence in their votes for greater participation in the well-being of our nation. I thank you for your time and your interest. Please pass this resolution out into the House for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Please hold for questions. Mr. Olson, the floor is yours for 3.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Norman Olson. I've been a citizen of Colorado for 52 years, and I currently reside in Centennial, Colorado. And is it not loud enough? Okay. And I'd like to ad lib a little bit in that I've been a libertarian for 30 years and served on the state board as state chair, run for office 7 times, and served 6 years on the national committee. So I'm not really a Republican. But let me get back to my testimony. Colorado voters have voted for term limits 4 times in statewide votes. The statewide offices were limited in 1990, congressional representatives in 94, Colorado legislators in 96, and the term limit pledge was approved in 98. Clearly, the citizens of Colorado are firm believers that term limits are helpful in maintaining responsible government. And if I can ad lib a little bit more, I think the fact that Colorado operates with term limits, but the long bill always gets passed, okay, and you get it done in 120 days, I think that speaks well for the fact that Colorado voters really like term limits, and it's working out well for us. But as you know, in 1995, the Supreme Court ruled that states cannot modify the qualifications of members of Congress. That decision voided the congressional term limit measures in 23 states. And of course, Colorado was one of those 23 states. Since that time, not less than 33 term limit measures have been introduced into Congress, all without success. It's very clear that the career politicians in Washington, D.C. are not going to vote on any limits to their careers. So given that the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. is now reaching epic proportions, I'm confident that this call for convention of the states would pass by a large margin if it were on the ballot in November. However, the Constitution says that you folks here have to make this call. Okay, with ballot initiative or a petition drive or a governor's petition was not going to make it. You guys have to make the call. So please make the call and give the committee of the House, the committee in full committee, I guess, that terminology used. Committee in full, give them a chance to debate this and give them a chance to express the voters' opinion, the voters of Colorado. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your time. Committee, questions for this panel of witnesses? Seeing none, we thank you for your testimony today. Let's go on to the next panel. We've got a panel of 4 here, 3 remote witnesses, Donaldson Lowry, Tim Schneider, and Laura Niemeister. And then I believe in person we have Derek Latrielle. And while we're pulling up our online folks, we'll start with our in-person witness. You'll correct me on the pronunciation of your last name. The floor is yours for 3 minutes, and we appreciate you being here.
Thanks. It's French. So, yeah, impossible. Don't worry about it. Hi, I'm Derek. I'm 51. I have 3 kids, and I wrote this, and I'm not going to read it to you. I decided to just talk to you, having observed. And I want to just talk to you about 2 things, really, I guess. One, I came out here to go to college at the University of Colorado. I studied economics, so I am an economist. And if you'd like any information about the national debt and when it reaches the point of being out of control, I'm your guy. Receipts, expenditures, etc. I can talk about that. But it's going to be a problem. The second thing is, so just an offer, if you have any questions on that. I won't drown you in all that. But more personally, I have a daughter who's 13 years old. And she's done a couple of odd things in her life. One was whenever I would hold her mother's hand, she'd scream like bloody murder when she was a toddler because she was like, don't hold her hand, hold my hand. But the other is that she would frequently ask us, not frequently, but occasionally ask us, I guess I should say, are we in debt? Do we have a financial problem? And we were trying to figure this out, my wife and I. And I guess where it came from was that we would say, well, let's wait till next month to buy that. Let's hold off on this. Let's hold off on that, right? And I don't know where she got this idea, but she got this idea that debt was a really serious problem. And just, I guess, the fiscal responsibility of a household should probably be similar to the fiscal responsibility of a country. Imagine when I tell her that she's $100,000 in debt personally to the federal government, that every one of us is, all across the country. My household is $500,000 in debt. I have a 22-year-old son who's 18. Who's 18? I got a 22-year-old son and an 18-year-old son, both $100,000 in debt. The federal government's not going to get this under control. They're not going to change this. They have no motivation to do so. And the point of no return is around the corner. So I just want to encourage you. I know you've got a lot of things to think about, runaway conventions and all those things like that, but I just came to speak about that piece. And for my kids, that we're careful about considering this and considering the impact on our kids. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Let's go online to Ms. Niemeister. If you can unmute, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Laura Nymeister. I live in Representative Matt Soper's House District 54. As State Director for Colorado Convention of States Action, I'm pleased to announce that we have over 54,700 Colorado constituents who have signed our petition to call for an Article 5 convention. Coloradans are dissatisfied with the federal government, and we are calling on you for help. One of our greatest concerns is the national debt. In 1929, our national debt was $17 billion, a 16% debt to gross domestic product ratio. America was producing more than it owed. Today, our national debt is over $34 trillion, over a 125% debt to gross domestic product ratio. We can see from history, the federal government does not choose to be fiscally responsible, which is why Colorado must be one of the 34 states to call for an Article 5 convention. It does not matter who's in control of the White House. Both parties are irresponsible with the money of hardworking Americans, and we must hold them accountable. Our founding fathers gave we the people, working through you, our elected representatives, the authority to keep the federal government fiscally responsible. The subject needs much more attention than these testimonies are able to provide, which is why I'm asking you to vote yes on HJR 1024. I ask you to be open-minded about the fiscal dangers you and I and our future generations are being burdened with, and be willing to discuss it in more detail in the House chamber. Please, for your 54,000 plus constituents, vote yes. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Nymeister. Mr. Schneider, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. If you can unmute and share your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Honorable Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Schneider. I'm a regional captain for Convention of States Action, and I'm a longtime resident of Colorado, living in Aurora, and then in Littleton, and now currently in Larkspur, where Representative Brandy Bradley proudly preserves as the House District 39's representative. I'm a retired engineer and grandfather of 3 who has seen our federal government's lack of implementing any physical constraints raise our national debt over $34.5 trillion and rising. This national debt has increased on an average of $1 trillion with a T per year for the past 30 years. Our public debt as a percentage of GDP has been over 100% for the past 10 years. We have lost our separation of powers between the states and the federal government. The reason I support Resolution HJR 24-1024 is I strongly believe it is time to put some fiscal restraints on our federal government, specifically a balanced budget mandate. We know, or at least we should know, that our elected officials in Washington will not impose physical constraints upon themselves. History has proven this time and time again. I must ask you, if term limits and a balanced budget are required for the state of Colorado, why shouldn't we support similar requirements upon our federal government? Only the American people represented by their state representatives can be trusted to impose restrictions on our national representatives. For this reason, our state representatives were given exactly the same powers given our national representatives to propose specific amendments to the Constitution. I believe that the Colorado state legislators have the moral responsibility to use the powers given them by Article 5 to control abuses against the Constitution, and that is what this resolution proposes. A big thank you to the House of Representatives who have sponsored and co-sponsored this resolution. Please vote to move Resolution HJR 24-1024 out of committee to the House floor for full debate and vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, we have 1 witness in person, 2 online. Questions? Okay, we thank you for your testimony today. Our next panel will be 2 witnesses, both in person, I believe. We've got James Oates and Patty Thomas. If you're here, come on forward. Great. And Ms. Thomas, once you're settled, we'll start with you. You can unmute your microphone there, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours for 3.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, thank you for your time and your service. And I really appreciate, as I've been sitting back there, many of you have been watching and paying attention and asking great questions. I really appreciate that today. I know you have a lot to think about, so thank you. I am a clinical nutritionist in private practice for 30 years, most of those in Fort Collins. In the 80s, I became very ill with chronic fatigue. My first step toward recovery was through diet change, a diet that would never be sanctioned by today's federal government agencies. At that time, I could tolerate only meat and vegetables. Supplements, many with glandulars from animals, were also key. The current proposed direction from federal agencies is that we should all eat less, maybe even no meat, and more plant protein, which is often very high in inflammatory oxalates. Our federal government tries to fit every American into a niche. They would like to tell us all what to eat, where to live, what we can access. What about my body, my choice? Each of my clients is unique. For some, no chicken, for others, no wheat or dairy, soy or beans. Almost any food can make us sick. Red meat is often required by many for their recovery and to maintain restored health. There's never been any one way for anything, nor any one diet for all. We must maintain federal or personal, not federal, control over our bodies and our health, and local control over our industries and economies. A question for all of you. I wonder if any of you know of a Dr. Eric Naput. He's a chiropractor and natural medicine doctor in St. Louis. In June of 2020, the DOJ fined him $2 billion for recommending zinc and vitamins D and C to help against COVID illness. The DOJ spent untold millions of our tax dollars over 3 years trying to take down Dr. Naput. I'm outraged by this federal overreach, and it is one of only far too many. Thus, I'm hopeful that a convention of states to consider amendments to the U.S. Constitution could help determine ways to limit federal jurisdiction and return to self-determination. We will do better to limit federal bureaus and build strength in Colorado. Thank you again for your consideration of this resolution and passing it to the full House.
Thank you for your testimony. Please hold for questions. Mr. Oates, the floor is yours for 3.
Good afternoon, Chairman, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Dr. James Oates, representing the Convention of States organization. I'm here to support this bill because Colorado needs a voice at the Convention of States. I'm a former U.S. Navy hospital corpsman and retired doctor of dental surgery. I will address the subject of federal jurisdiction overreach. This will be an agenda item at the Convention of States. Federal jurisdiction overreach is when federal agencies and bureaucracies make their own laws and apply them to the states as the supreme law of the land without the input of Congress or the president. These agencies are administered by non-elected officials who often spend their entire career in an agency. These agencies include the EPA, the CDC, Homeland Security, NIH, and as we just heard, the FDA, the U.S. Department of Education, and many, many other agencies and bureaucracies. Time does not permit me to delve into all these agencies, so I will use the U.S. Department of Education as an example. Every state has a Department of Education that oversees the administration and curriculum of their state schools. They are best suited to assess the educational needs of their state and local communities. The U.S. Department of Education has a budget of $68 billion and 4,400 employees. Their 2025 budget is $82 billion, a 20% increase. Their mission: promote student achievement and preparation for global competitiveness by fostering educational excellence and ensuring equal access. Sounds really good, but the entire department is failing in its mission. In 1960s and 70s, the United States was #1 in education in the world. Today, we're ranked 13th, 38th in math, 24th in science. The Department of Education is failing their mission. Their overreach requires states to use and not use specific books, present specific courses, curriculum, and adopt specific administrative procedures. State departments of education can do a better job of tailoring their curriculum to educate their students in their state. I encourage this committee and Colorado to pass this piece of legislation to the House of Representatives. Approve HJR 241024 so that the House of Representatives can participate in the Convention of States. At the Convention of States, the size and the scope of the federal government.
And sir, I
will be
hate to interrupt you,
discussed.
but we do need to have you wrap up your testimony.
Are we done?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We, of course, have time for questions. If anybody has questions for this panel of witnesses, we thank you for your time.
I do have copies, so.
Great, thank you. And if you can give
Amanda,
those
if you could.
to our staff, we'll make sure those get distributed. Thank you. All right, our next panel will be a little larger, and then we've got just one closing panel with one witness. Great. And if we can start here on my left, your right, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. If you can unmute your microphone and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the panel. Ladies and gentlemen of the Colorado State Legislature, my name is Lynn Ray. I humbly stand before you this afternoon as a teacher, instructor, patriot, father of 4 very successful children, adults now, a grandfather of 10, 23-year Air Force veteran pilot, and nuclear biological chemical officer, instructor, 2nd Armored Division Airlift Liaison Officer, a savior of lives, including my own, a scoutmaster to over 300 boys, 17 Eagle Scouts, 6 seminarians, 3 priests, 5 youth directors, 2 theology professors, and several Marines, and more. And my purpose here today is to use these skills to teach and inform you on how critically important it is to support our founding fathers who came up with Article 5 concerning the Constitution. And I want to say too that we are not a convention, a constitutional convention. We are a convention of states. We love the Constitution. We're trying to use the Constitution to save the Constitution with Article 5. And last year we were at the Colorado State Fair, and we signed up over 1,000 people. And last year we signed up over 1,700 people. And my goal this year in 2024 is to sign up over 4,000 people in the COS petition. So I also wanted to say that what I wanted to say is I was being a pilot, a C-130 pilot. One of the things that we used to do is drop paratroopers out of our plane, and we have 64 seats for paratroopers. We have 128 if we don't have paratroopers, but 64 for paratroopers because of all their gear. And that would include everybody on the House of Representatives except one. So we would put Ms. McCluskey up front with us so she could jump too. And so what we do is we have 2 doors, okay? And we can drop people out of 2 doors at the same time. So you can imagine yourself, you got the parachute gear on. And here's the thing about the parachutes. The parachutes have a main chute, and that main chute was put together by the federal government for you. Okay? And the second parachute is a reserve chute. And that was put together by our founding fathers, James Madison, George Mason, Henry, anyway, by our founding fathers. And so, so what we want to do is, they did your reserve shoot. So here you go. You're going to go out the door, and you're going out with one of your colleagues. And as you go out, you go ahead and after you're traveling at 100 miles, 120 miles an hour towards the ground, and you pull your main chute, which was put together by the federal government, and it fails. And you say to the other person, "Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the reserve chute that was put together by our founding fathers."
Sir, if you could wrap up your testimony, my apologies. I
Oh,
just
okay.
want to be fair to all the witnesses.
All right. So basically, what we're saying is by using the Federal Reserve or our founding fathers, you can save the country. So I ask you to support Convention of States. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness, if you could introduce yourself, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you, representatives, for taking this time out of your busy schedules. My name is Darrell Rice. I was a naval pilot during the last half of the Vietnam War, and now I live in Brighton, Colorado, district number 48. My fellow airmen, soldiers, and sailors thought we were fighting for the American way of life and individual freedom and against the spread of communism. Almost 250 years earlier, George Washington and his Revolutionary Army were fighting King George III for their freedom and against royal control. Our founders understood the danger of governmental control of its citizens. So the U.S. Constitution gave its new federal government very few enumerated powers, and all the rest stayed with the states. So you are very important, as Article 5 gives the states the power to propose constitutional amendments which can limit the expanding power and jurisdiction of the federal government. You also have a much better knowledge of what Colorado citizens want than do Washington, D.C. bureaucrats. I believe that your constituents are unhappy with trillions of dollars in new federal spending and the subsequent new taxes needed to pay for it. An open southern border with millions coming for free benefits that once again the U.S. citizens pay for, while we have a legal immigration system that brings in over 1 million people a year, more than any other country. The Convention of States has the only answer in our U.S. Constitution to return power to the states and we the people. Please pass this resolution so that the full Colorado House of Representatives can vote for all Coloradans. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness, sir, if you'll introduce yourself, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Frank Vaughn, House District 27, and I've been in Colorado for over 40 years. I am chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of Article 5 Convention of States. Our nation's founding principles are deeply rooted in the belief that power should ultimately reside with the people in the states, not just in Washington, D.C. In Article 5, Convention of States provides a constitutionally prescribed method for addressing issues that are not adequately handled by Congress alone. This allows state legislatures to propose amendments to the Constitution, providing a crucial check and balance to the federal authority. An Article 5 proposal convention is not a partisan issue. It's all about safeguarding our union and ensuring that our government remains accountable to the people. It provides a constitutionally prescribed method for addressing issues that Congress won't take up. Contrary to the concerns about risk, the process is designed with safeguards. Any amendment proposed at such a convention must still be ratified by 3/4 of the states, ensuring a high threshold of constitutional changes. This process has been carefully crafted to allow for meaningful dialogue among states while maintaining a robust system of checks and balances. While some may raise concerns about the need or potential risk of an Article 5 Convention of States, it's important to recognize the practical benefits it offers. This process provides a peaceful and lawful means for states to propose solutions to pressing national issues. Rather than being risky, it is a structured and transparent approach that empowers states to address challenges that are not adequately addressed at the federal level. By working together, states can propose amendments that benefit all Americans and uphold the principles of our republic. And I have just a few more minutes here. I too, I retired from the Colorado Air National Guard in June of 2022, found myself with some extra time on my hands, and I ran across Article 5 Convention of States. And I too had a lot of thoughts, a lot of fear. But as I educated myself on the process of this issue, there was no fear. So if we have knowledge, we don't need to be fearful about the process. And in conclusion, I urge the committee to consider the merits of this approach and pass this resolution onto the House floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Appreciate your testimony. Please hold for questions. Senator Lundberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm Kevin Lundberg. I served in the seat you're sitting in right now for 16 years in the House and the Senate. And in 2013, I actually helped co-found the State Legislators Article 5 Caucus, which was a national organizational effort for state legislators. I've attended a lot of discussions and meetings with state legislators around the country in these past several years. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the why and the how. The why is, why did I get behind it in the first place? I can tell you that in those first few years in the legislature, it was particularly frustrating because I could see, and I'm sure you can see, that much of your actions are actually reactions to what Congress or some other branch, entity within the federal government is actually requiring of you. And that's appropriate that there be a back and forth. But the balance, in my opinion, was way out of order. The federal government became the driving force. And if you look at the U.S. Constitution, it actually limits the authority of government as opposed to our state constitution that enables and empowers. And if anything, the state legislators should be the real resident of political and civil power for our governance. But I found it to be quite the opposite. And that's why I got engaged in this, because I knew that it was an answer. It's been said much of this previous, but I'll simply repeat a few things, such as our founding fathers put this element within Article 5 in order to guard against what we see today, which is a runaway government. The federal government has far too much power in compared to local and state government. And Article 5, it was Alexander Hamilton who put it in the Federalist number 85, the final one written. He states, paraphrasing, if the federal government were to ever become too large and too controlling, that is why we put this element within Article 5, so the states can initiate a change there. I'd like to touch on one other element as well, on the why or the how, and that is the rules. Some have said, well, there are no rules. Well, you've heard of many of the rules, but one has not been mentioned yet, and that is the faithful delegate acts that about 20 states have passed. So the question is, can a convention run away? Well, first off, it takes 38 states to ratify anything because a convention can do no more than what Congress can do every day they meet. But in addition to that, several states have put in very strong and strict regulations on their commissioners to a convention. Some simply say you will be removed as a commissioner. Others say that you will be, and I recognize the lights flashing, others say that you will never be able to hold office again if you so choose. Others say you're going to jail. So I guarantee a convention of the states in today's political and legal environment cannot run away. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, questions for this panel of witnesses. Representative DeGraff.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm all on board with getting, throw the bums out. But I am struggling with the Constitutional Convention, and I do realize I missed some of this discussion when I was over on a different bill. Constitutional Convention, as a Congress calls the convention, sets the rules and determines the delegates, and then the assertion that there is no convention of states. So I don't understand I'm just having a trouble, I guess, getting past my own, I guess, preconceived notions as to convention of states versus constitutional convention.
Who would like to take that question? Senator Lundberg? Go
I'll be
for it.
glad to field that one. I've been working on this thing for nearly a dozen years now. And first off, no, it is not a constitutional convention. Mike Ferris noted the debate he made on that, on just what can it not do in that law review from Harvard Law Review, I think it's published in. But the biggest issue is the 38 state requirement. 3/4 of the states have to ratify anything that comes out of a convention of states for Article 5. I should call it this way, an Article 5 convention of states, because states can meet in convention for many reasons. And as a matter of fact, we met down in Phoenix some years ago to simply consider rules for an Article 5 convention. There have also been two conventions, not conventions of states, but a simulation of an Article 5 convention. And that convention the states did. I attended both. I was actually the chair of the Fiscal Restraint Committee on both. And I can assure you that it's that when delegates get together, or commissioners as they're called, to actually come up with some amendments, that they understand how weighty it is, and they understand that they are constrained with, if you put something together that either the right or the left can't agree on it, you're not going to get 38 states agreeing to it. So this is an opportunity for both political sides of the political spectrum to find those solutions that will not win their side or the other side of the argument, but will win the side of the argument for the states and put state legislators back in the driver's seat.
Further questions? Representative Bradley.
Thank you. And thank you for that. 16 years here makes me nauseous to think about. God bless you for doing it. So when the people come up and say there's no rules and guardrails, because our caucus is a little bit split on this too, you're saying that's absolutely not true, correct?
Senator
Absolutely correct. And if I had 4 or 5 hours or a couple of days, we could really dig into that.
Further questions? Yep, Mr. Vaughn.
So there are guardrails in this process. And what you need to think about is, first, you select the people that go to the convention, the commissioners that go. This Colorado State Legislature is going to tell those people that they're going to go, but then they're also going to give them a commission, okay? And those are the rules of how you want them to operate. And it's like the senator articulated with legislation. You can create legislation to put teeth into that as well, okay? But then once they get there, if they do something wrong through agency law, you can recall those folks, okay? And you can replace them. So if they do something, if you chose poorly on a commissioner and they got carried away, you could recall that individual immediately and replace that person, okay? And then it also takes any proposal that comes out, it has to get through 26 states first in the convention. Another check and balance, right? But then after that, it goes back to Congress. Congress determines how it's going to be ratified, whether it's a state legislature ratification or whether you're actually going to have a Colorado convention, okay? So there are many checks and balances in this. And as you educate yourself, and that's what we really want you to do, is just to educate yourself on this process, because as we educate constituents in Colorado, they're all going, this is the right thing to do. This is the only thing that we can do. It's legal, and you have that authority. So thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? I'm going to go Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, lots of folks, including yourself, have mentioned today that that we're talking about a convention of states, not a constitutional convention. If for someone who does support the idea of it being time for a constitutional convention, would advancing this proposal on this resolution get us closer to that further in that direction, further away from it? Is it neutral? How would you describe the relationship of one to the other?
Well, let me put it this way. We have amended our Constitution as a nation 27 times. An Article 5 Convention of the States seeks to continue that process. For this particular resolution, they are calling for 3 different subjects. So very strong possibility that there would be more than one amendment proposed. But even as Mike Ferris noted that for the Bill of Rights that we think of as a package of 10, it was 12 originally, and each one was selected individually. That's the mechanism that we have in place for modifying our Constitution. You know, and in direct answer to would this be in any way or could it lead to a constitutional convention, what I hear out of that is it's a meeting where everything's on the table and we're just going to scrap everything that was there and start over. And no, this doesn't get us close to that at all. What this does is it stays with what has proven well for us through the centuries of piece by piece. If there's something that needs to be changed, then we do that specifically there, but we don't throw the rest out. When I served, I raised my right hand to obey and follow the state and federal constitution. I consider that my duty. I would never have chosen to scrap those documents. Change, when necessary, yes, but hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Wilford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. My question is for you, Senator Lindbergh. Welcome back. We've heard other witnesses talk a lot about the Convention on States and certainly your role in bringing that work to the Colorado State Legislature. We've also heard that this is a nonpartisan effort. And so I'm wondering, I guess, 2 things. One is, can you remind me what party you represented when you were here elected in the legislature? I'll let you answer that, and then I do have a follow-up, sir.
Certainly, I was and continue to be a member of the Republican Party of Colorado.
Wonderful.
Senator
And a quick,
and Representative Wilford.
thank you. And is it true that you're currently chairing the effort to fundraise on behalf of the effort of the Colorado Republican Party to sue to close the primary?
I'm chairman of the
Senator
committee,
Lundberg,
the lawsuit committee, yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Representative Wilford. We have one more question. I just want to be mindful of our time, if it's okay, just to kind of move the dialogue along. Representative Graff, and then I can come back, sir, if there's time.
For any, a question I've had is why not just have, I guess, 3 amendments written out that everybody signs on to to approve, as opposed to let's decide to get together to decide to write something up.
Who would like to take that? Senator Lundberg?
Well, let me take it only
Sure.
because that was tried for a balanced budget amendment. It was called the Compact for America, I believe it was, where the resolutions were to support a very specific worded amendment. I don't think that's the best way to go. It doesn't allow the deliberation necessary, because remember, final word is you've got to get 38 states, and that's almost a guarantee for failure in that regard.
And Mr. Ray, can you take us home with the remaining seconds?
Yeah. I just want to say that when I'm at these events and I'm educating people on the Convention of States, they'll ask me right off, are you Republican or Democrat? And I tell them, I am not a donkey and I'm not an elephant. I'm an American eagle. And they go, where do I sign? Where do I sign?
Thank you, sir. Any further questions for this panel? Seeing none, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm going to call up Mr. Forbes last to give closing remarks, but I do need to ask if there's anybody else in the room who wishes to testify on HJR 1024. Great. Mr. Forbes, come on forward.
I'd like to pass around my testimony, please. Thank you very much.
Mr. Forbes, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. If you can unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and we're pleased to receive your testimony.
Yes, my name is Michael Forbes, and I'm from House District 14 under Representative Rose Puglisi. To members of the committee, my name is Michael Forbes, and thank you for letting me speak with you today on the Convention of States resolution. During the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln led the nation through its greatest trial and division in U.S. history. There were 620,000 American lives lost on the battlefield, and the significance of these losses, the magnitude of these losses, was strong evidence of the country's division. Slavery was the core issue at this division, and Lincoln believed the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery was necessary to help end the division and heal the nation from the Civil War. President Lincoln called the 13th Amendment the king's cure for all the evils. In other words, Lincoln believed God used the 13th Amendment to help heal the nation from the Civil War. In today's age, the United States faces another great division, and it's about the increased centralized power that exists within the federal government. For example, members of Congress have become career politicians, and they refuse to give up power. In addition, the federal government has not been disciplined in spending because the national debt has grown exponentially and outpaced the gross domestic product. The American public has great distrust and senses enormous corruption within the federal government, and it is time for a cure to come forth to help heal the nation. The U.S. Constitution Article 5 amendment process involving a convention of states is the best approach to help heal the nation, and its sole purpose is to limit the power of the federal government. The Convention of States can propose a series of amendments to limit the power of the federal government, and it serves as a cure to help heal the nation from its current divide. So, let's apply the historical lesson from President Abraham Lincoln and use the amendment process to the U.S. Constitution to help heal the nation. For Colorado, it can start with this committee passing the Convention of States resolution and sending it to the main House floor for full consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, questions for this witness? It means you nailed it. We thank you for your time. All right, the witness testimony phase is closed. Resolution sponsor, amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no amendments.
Committee, any amendments? Seeing none, the amendments phase is closed. Madam Minority Leader, closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I think we got a lot of good information today. I know I learned a lot even just sitting through this presentation. And I understand your angst because I felt angst as well. Like I said, I do think that there's a way that we can limit our participation in the Article 5 Convention of States for 3 amendments to impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and most important to me is limit the put term limits on Congress because they have had the opportunity to do it on themselves and they have not taken that opportunity. And so I do appreciate the conversation. I will say I appreciate the opportunity to be able to bring this resolution forward to you all for consideration, and I would ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, a proper motion routes this to the full House, and then we'll take some closing statements. Representative Bottoms.
I move HCR 241024 to the Committee of the Whole.
Nope, to the House.
To the House.
Second.
Great. Moved and seconded by Representative Bradley. Committee, closing remarks. Representative Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of thanks and an ask. We're always thankful when witnesses come and testify. Today, there were some things that were done that I wanted to lift up just because I would warmly encourage others to repeat what I consider some best practices. I really appreciated how many people told something that only they could tell. Our friend who spoke about dietary restrictions, telling me something that no one else is going to be able to hear me is something that I find helpful. It was very helpful how witnesses today, pretty, if not everyone close to it, told us your district. That's really helpful to us as well, naming that, and I'm appreciative of the written testimony just as an accommodation. I would like to ask whoever has the petitions, the 54,000, I would love to get the names of the folks in my own district, and I'm going to speak for my colleagues in saying they would too, especially if they are actual petitions signed by actual people in our districts. No shade to other groups. I want to comment in explaining my vote here on this the concept of passing something on to the fuller house, and then I want to just have a word for the opponents and proponents. I believe that some things that were said today made me wonder if there's a bit of a misunderstanding of almost sort of what our duty is in terms of as a committee. If the majority of the committee does not find something worthy of enactment, it's indeed our responsibility to not pass it on. We're not supposed to send it on for further consideration. But that phrase, fuller consideration, is where I want to offer a bit of education, if I could, that while going to the full house is consideration by the full house, that's not where full consideration happens. We needed to hear from folks. I'll speak for myself, need to hear from folks before today. The flurry of what happens between now and floor is not a time where I'm able to synthesize and get a whole bunch of new information. So far be it from me how to suggest anyone should stay cold or otherwise, but I'm hearing from folks who have a lot of good information that I would have worked to parse through and really like to consider before today. A word to opponents of this proposal, of this resolution. As I mentioned at the start, I really spent way more time researching this over the past week than I can justify. But it's fascinating to me, and I just am not hearing from opponents actual arguments that resonate with me about why to vote no. It feels like fear mongering, the sort of the vagaries around rules not being in place is just a fact it doesn't have a value attached to it to me, right? We can make rules or not. It just is. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. The comments that I've heard, not just today, but in other spaces around this bill, suggesting that the climate right now is too dangerous. I mean, I'm here and have a voice in this process in a way that someone, that my immediate ancestors would not have at this same moment in time. So I'm just offering that that's not something that moves me. People are motivated by different things. And I don't want to use the word fear mongering again, but the sort of claims around it could run amok in chaos, that's just way too esoteric. I'm not convinced enough that those are reasons to vote no. That said, when I look at legislation or resolutions, I look at it as our starting point being sort of neutral. And I'm wrapping, Mr. Chair, I promise, by saying that today I felt like it was very clear that there were certain cases made and not made. And today was an uncommon day where I really wasn't sure how I was going to vote on several things. I absolutely think that the case was made strongly here today for a balanced budget mandate. I think the case was made very, very strongly for term limits. I think Colorado's are way too short. We should be looking around 12 years or so. We have way too much power in the lobby, but it shouldn't be infinite separate consideration. Those cases were made, but I just did not hear and have not heard the case made to justify advancing this in this way. And who knows whether I'll be here the next time this comes around or not, but my unsolicited advice is that I really hope that folks will take that advice that has been offered around not just looking at party lines and look and see who are the relative mavericks in parties and see who votes independently and see who votes around good governance issues, and maybe consider working, reaching out to some of those legislators to start some of those conversations. For me, while the case was made for a balanced budget mandate, for term limits, for some real loosening of some dietary related rules that I agree with, I did not hear the case made for advancing this to have us sign on as one of the states supporting Convention of States. And so for those reasons, I'll be a no.
Further comments, committee? Representative Bottoms.
So coming into this today, I have not been in favor of the convention mentality. For some of the reasons that I was asking the questions. I think we're potentially being naive, that we get all these different state legislators together and everybody gets along and comes up with something functional. I think that's the first block. The second thing, there really is no rules for how to have this. So then that means those same group of people have to come up with the rules first. I'm very apprehensive about this. I did hear some legitimate explanations of some of that. And so I was planning on voting no, but I would like to see it come to the floor and us discuss it from the floor. not from the point of the partisan, because I think I'm one of the arguments that this is not a partisan issue. You know, I think I've convinced most people I'm fairly conservative. But I am struggling with this a little bit. So I do want to hear it on the floor, and I want to hear some debate from a lot of people and see what this looks like. But I have been convinced enough to say, let's take it to the floor today.
Representative Bradley.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I appreciate you bringing this forward. I've heard from a lot of my constituents who believe very strongly in setting term limits. I believe in term limits. It's the first thing I signed, and I didn't even have to. But if I were to go to DC, it would be the first thing that I would do. I think that the power trip that politicians on both sides have been on is ridiculous. I think they've lost touch with all of their constituent base, and that's on both sides. I think that testimony today, I would agree with my colleague from across the aisle that testimony was good. I like to hear where people are from, and there was a wide array of people that represent each of our districts that came today. And also the testimony that did show that there are guardrails, that there's a process. This isn't just a free for all. And I do think it's nonpartisan. I think that we have to wrap our brain around $8 trillion budget and what we're going to be leaving for our kids to take over. So I will be a yes today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other further comments? Representative Wilford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to have had this conversation today, and would just ask for a bit of latitude as I share my final comments. I've really been trying to sit with and overcome the argument that this resolution and a convention of states should not be a partisan issue. We're all Americans and representatives, and we have a duty to represent the people. And while I can agree that we all have a duty to represent the people, the thing that I take issue with is the sentiment that this is not a partisan issue. When we all can't agree that President Biden won the 2020 election, when we can't all agree that what happened on January 6th, 2021 was an insurrection and an attempt to overturn an election, when we have colleagues who deny climate change, who want to control women's bodies and our futures, who want to erase our LGBTQ plus friends, family members, and neighbors, and who call human beings illegal and aliens in the same breath, when the organization championing this resolution used an independent expenditure committee to spend $324,000 in the last election cycle to support only conservative legislators in our state, I can't trust the argument that this resolution is anything other than a play to revoke some of our most cherished rights, like our right to peaceful protest, freedom of religion, or our right to privacy. To my colleague from Douglas County who referenced the donations by a teachers union in Colorado, I would argue that those donations are very different because a teachers union's not trying to rewrite the Constitution. Make no mistake, this is a very partisan effort, and it's part of a long game to undo any and all progress made on voting rights, abortion, equity, and so much more. The Convention of States notes that their objective is for a constitutional convention to be convened to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints, and place term limits on federal officials. And not only are those first two things extremely broad, but I'm not naive enough to think or believe that a convention once called could be restricted to only those topics. It was suggested that this is one of the most important decisions that we as legislators could ever make. And to that point, I say absolutely. I do agree. So I will be unapologetic in exercising my American right to disagree, and in do so representing my over 87,000 We the People constituents with my no vote today. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, Ms. King, please call the roll.
Representatives Bottoms,
Yes.
Bradley,
Yes.
Brown,
No.
DeGraff,
Pass.
Epps,
No.
Prenti,
No.
Ricks,
No.
Brutnow,
No.
Wilford? No. DeGraff,
Yes.
Woodrow,
No.
Mr. Chair.
No.
That motion fails on a vote of 3-8. Is there a motion? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that this bill be postponed indefinitely by using reverse roll call.
Is there seconded by Representative Ricks? Any objection? Seeing no objection, HJR 1024 is postponed indefinitely. We thank you for your time.
Thank you, committee, for being so engaged. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, committee, we are going to move right along into our next bill.
Andrew, I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
I didn't realize that I was muted. I was there talking for at least 2 to 3 minutes. I was just recapping the fact that the bill HJR 1024 was unsuccessful. A vote of 3-8 to not send to the House floor, and then it was also postponed indefinitely. I want to get your reaction to what we just saw and the almost 2-hour-long committee hearing.
Very long. The team was just poised and prepared. They have been working on this testimony for probably a couple months now. They went forward probably about a year ago and knew that they were going to run this process as they did. Unfortunately, they did expect a loss. This is, I believe, a kill committee. And going up against 8 Democrats and 3 Republicans, it is hard, but powerful testimony. And there were some swaying. There were some people thinking. They had some items that they had never thought about, and they told us that. And with just a little bit more education, I think this can be really powerful.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. Listening to it, there was one that comes to mind, Representative Epps, and she chimed in several times. And at the end, in the closing remarks, she had talked about how the opposition didn't do a very good job, and the opposition was using fear-mongering. And I'm referencing the Miss Brownlee from Common Cause, and which is a Soros-funded organization. And it was the same old thing that we hear from these Common Cause representatives. There's no process. There's no rules. It's dangerous. You're going to lose your rights. It's all about fear-mongering and loss and all that. But Representative Epps, even though she voted no, she wasn't swayed by that. Instead, she wanted more. It seems that she wants more information and that she needs a bit more education. She kind of alluded to that as well by saying that she wished she had more information before the hearing began. What were your thoughts on how she said on what she said about that?
I agree with her because, there was no opposition. Was there 3 people that came? That was maybe the max 4. And again, she called them out on the fear mongering. It made me just think how obvious they are and the opposition. And I'm really sorry to hear that she didn't, sway to a yes vote. Maybe it's a party line thing. She says she doesn't, she votes independently, but there was a lot of education today. I mean, 2 hours worth of testimony, and Dr. Michael Ferris joining in and giving his expert, not even opinion, but his expert wisdom on this issue that he writes and defends in court. So it is sad that she did not sway. We did not sway her, but there's seeds planted there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just recapping the testimony, Michael Ferris did such an excellent job explaining the rules, explaining the process. Every concern that was brought up, he had an answer to fill in with information and how the process works and on the rules and the history and court cases and litigation, all those. But
I think you're frozen, Andrew. I'm hoping it's not me. Well, I'll make a comment while I'm still here. Hopefully you guys can all hear me. Yes, Dr. Michael Ferris was on his toes, on his feet, and on his game today. I enjoyed how he brought up, the unanimous vote that came out of the Articles of Confederation. And he reiterated the fact that this is not a general convention, that a general convention is dangerous, and how this is an amendment convention. And I believe a couple of the legislators mentioned that it almost clicked in and figured it out. And they were understanding that it was two complete different things, that the opposition brings up constitutional convention. That's not what this is. It's an amendment convention. Yes, Andrew, I would love to see you come back on. There we go.
I don't, it's sometimes, sometimes technology gets a little wonky on us, Deanna. But yeah, the other part of my question was just about the volunteers and about the grassroots supporters and how they have such a unique and wonderful story that they present at these hearings with their testimony. And were there any moments that stood out listening to any of the volunteers that testified? I know there was the legislative liaison I heard at one point and the state grassroots coordinator, but there were also several other leaders and supporters who were there at the committee room.
Absolutely. I think all of our leaders were either in person or online testimony. The thing that stood out to me was, let's see, the issues, what my notes say, issues cut across party lines, and we are all we the people. I think that may have come from a legislator, but as for things that were reiterated, whether it was what Senator Lundberg or our constituents, our volunteers, our activists, we had amazing stories, whether they were they had served in the military, they had run businesses. Many of them have been lifelong members or lifelong people that have lived in Colorado. These aren't just move-ins, and they're here to stand for their state and stand for we the people. And they waited for hours to speak. I was just amazed.
Mm-hmm. All right, Deanna, I got two more questions for you. What happens next? So for the viewers that are just tuning in now, unfortunately, the resolution did not make it out of the committee. It was a 3-8 against moving our resolution out to a full floor vote of the House. But what happens next? This is a defeat, but we're not out yet. We're not. This isn't, pack up your bag. There's no more work to be done in Colorado. So what's the team going to do next?
Well, what has been planned for many months, right, even before this committee hearing was planned, is we have a rally with Mark Meckler this coming Thursday on the west steps of the Capitol in Denver at 11 a.m. We'll be there from about 11 to 1 o'clock. So if anybody wants to come out, west steps of the Capitol, we'll be there. I'll be on the ground with the team. We're going to do some recognition. We're going to do some inspiration. Senator Lundberg will be there. And we are looking forward to gathering as a group and celebrating where we've gotten to, where we've come to. Yes, the votes weren't there today, but we're going to celebrate the work that the team has done and the team has completed. And realistically, this resolution was a miracle in itself. We were hesitant on if it was going to come out. It was the last minute, the last hour of the last day. And the team got the message that we had a resolution number. And within 48 hours, we were scheduled for committee. We had a committee and we had a hearing date and a time. So that is enough to be celebrated right there.
Mm-hmm. All right, Deanna, what's your call to action to everyone who's tuning in right now? What's your call to action to all the people in Colorado?
We need more people like these folks that were doing testimony. So conventionofstates.com and click take action. We need more people. If you can give 2 hours a week or 20 hours a week, we need your efforts on the ground in your district. So go to conventionofstates.com /act now that we've got the right thing on the screen.
Well, Deanna, thank you so much. I truly appreciate the time that you've given me and the viewers, and I thank you for the leadership that you have leading this team and helping them along the way, and being a person that can pour into this team and help them to be trained and educated and ready to do this committee hearing. So thank you so much for all of that. We hope to have you back in the near future when the resolution gets introduced to Colorado again, and hopefully next time you and the team will be able to push the ball down the court just a little bit further. Thank you, Deanna. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are going to sign off. Join us Wednesday, May 1st at 8 p.m.